Which is what if Temari's worst Monday changed her life part 2. Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Shikamaru had been late for the first meeting of the day, still beating Kakashi in the end as he sat himself at her side and soon after Sakura from across. The 4 new heads of their department all in one room, and his partner in the matter glued to a trio of manila folders, hopping from one then another as things went on. Kakashi had started to address the team of a grand new client he had from a up-and-coming foreign company from Kumo, and his work soon became a lesson to the new arrivals. Asking questions and engaging with the practice crowd, throwing in policies to test skills and keep everyone's attention. All but one paid attention. So what do you think, Temari? He asked out of curiosity versus seeking his coworker's approval, leaning down by her side as she paused her writing. To look at him, wanting her to engage. Clearly it needs finishing touches, half-heartedly pointing to the board and returning her focus to the papers before her and leaning against her hand. It gets sloppy in the end when you introduce the people being the main focus instead of focusing on product. Too analytical, Kakashi scolded with a sigh, leaning away to continue his leisurely walk around the room. Truth hurts, doesn't it? She snarked back, still focused on the red marks made on paper. Temari, walk with me in my vision. Kakashi strolled past the end of the table and casually made his way down to the boards again. Peeking up at him again, Temari rolled her eyes, sighed, and leaned back in her chair, giving her full attention to Kakashi. They want to promote unity, a community coming together, and we want them to be our promoters. These people will share the idea by themselves without us having to do anything. It's a win-win situation. All I see is failure, she deadpanned. I'll ask the children then. Kakashi addressed the 2 others in the room, Sakura scribbling every word down since she got there and Shikamaru focusing from one to another as the meeting went on. What do you 2 see? Quote, you'll need a social media outlook to it if you want to promote unity. Sakura quickly took her cue to blurt out the answer and grin at the nod of approval. It'll broaden your target audience, Shikamaru added, fighting a yawn for the millionth time that morning. Bingo! We need younger viewers in order to get this going, Kakashi announced, pointing to the board. Kakashi, that isn't a reliable option, Temari huffed, holding back a groan at his drawling words, it's too unpredictable. Quote, I've got 2 wonderful students paying attention. He gestured to the others then glanced at her. What happened with you? 6 months she spent under his directorship, and her final judgment had been as blunt as ever. She's seen GR grow faster than the man worked, but always so precise and direct when he made his mark. In her books he was a man to be respected, with only the occasional bite back from her every now and then. As far as work husbands went, Kakashi was a man from humble beginnings and she nodded to him, accepting his trust and judgment most days. The snares of tragedy, sensei, she sighed, bouncing her leg as she criticized his work, the same ones that will chew your idea up and spit it out. Quote, cruelty strikes again. Kakashi faked a grip at his chest, making Temari scoff as she leaned forward to make her point. You can't rely on the community promoting this idea. It's naive to believe that influencers will add any value to this, and if they do, it'll be minute at best. Leaning back she swiped her hand at him, he could hear her crossed legs bounce annoyingly below her. It is a waste of time and resources, so it's not worth the effort. Broaden your mind, dear, you're too stuck on the little details. Her jaw tensed, comment at the ready, but she huffed it out and leaned back in the chair, respectful enough of her old boss's take to not attack. Too slow for her tastes, but hitting its mark. You'll see more if you do it. With a final roll of her eyes, Temari flicked her wrist, checking the time, her golden hour approaching. My eyes are just fine, Kakashi. Mind your own prescription. He chuckled as she rose from her spot, collecting papers while addressing the other heads. Sakura, Kakashi will bring you up to speed on the spreadsheet this month, and Nara, we've got our pitch to entertain. Sakura sat straighter at her name being called, a habit hard to break after working for nearly a year and a half under Temari's department. Yes ma'am. Sakura slowly deflated from her stiff stance at the subtle look of those colored eyes and offered a sheepish grin. I mean, Temari. Remember that everything we discuss in this room is temptation wrapped in money, and Mr. Yamanaka expects us to perform at our very best every single day. Her eye narrowed enough to make it a warning. Everything else is controlled by Miss Senju, our CEO. We are the front lines to this company and we protect it beyond just its numbers. Am I understood, Miss Haruno? Quote. Well, don't scare the poor thing on her first day, Temari. Kakashi sighed as Temari came to his side and handed him one of the folders, a report he had given her to peek at for a second set of eyes while they discussed the basics, and then followed it with a tedious project he had been working on, testing the new heads while also getting aid from them. She'll be fine. Temari brushed him off and threw a look at the new hire. Friendly if she tried hard enough. Sakura is very resilient, it's why I tortured her more than the others. Fangs bared at the end, addressing the room. People show the most promise through pressure, or how else would we create diamonds? Good luck with that shark today. Amused, Kakashi glanced back at her as she paused at the door, one final smirk to remind the room of who she was. I don't need luck to put men in their places. If Shikamaru wasn't feeling uneasy this morning for being late, met with that unforgiving glare and his name demoted to his last, he was feeling the pressure now. Sighing as he followed and absently wished for another coffee to help fuel his tired steps. Good luck to you too, Kakashi nodding to Shikamaru as he ped him, just slowing his step enough to ask. With the presentation or with her? Quote. Both. She's a little on edge today. Kakashi winked and turned back to Sakura. Shall we, Miss Haruno? Sakura already on her heels and excited to start her day alongside a new mentor and a new team she would be managing soon enough. Shikamaru threw a wave back at the newest director and followed after his partner. Her approach still remaining blunt and forceful, but effective, leaving the survivors to praise her rather than question it. Mentally halfway through the pitch he knew she would be presenting that day, he couldn't quite decide if her planned-out direction would be worth the mention of his concern. Though he had sat up until nearly 3 last night reading and memorizing every page she had given him, he had one point. Tea had been eating away at him as he paused his steps at her side in front of the elevator. You said in your notes that the Kirin deal is being made by their CEO Kisame Hoshigaki, right? No better way to ask, he went with direct and subtly glanced at her. Yes. She didn't bother to look at him as she stepped first into the elevator, speaking as she turned to face the doors. Why are you asking? Kisame owns a side company that supplies spiced seltzer made with alcohol. He pushed the button as he stepped to her side, his hands slipped into his pockets, the silver lighter firm in his grip, comforting and aiding his concern. He wants us to promote underage drinking for his company through his soft drinks. He waited through her exhale. I'm aware. And you're fine with that? Now she looked at him, just a side glance in warning. Thought I told you not to question me when it came to business, partner. He sighed, making one last effort to see where she was going to go. I just want to know your end game here, Temari. My end game, she hummed, catching his eyes as she turned to stand in front of him and look up. Here's another tip, Nara, I am anything but predictable, so try to keep up in there. She leaned closer, a quick little bear of her fanged smile to divert his eyes off hers, watching the way her lips moved as she scolded him, and fix your tie, you look like a mess. Quote. A final strike, flicking his crooked pale gray tie with a manicured finger, the simple act mentally throwing him back against the wall at such an unexpected sanctimonious move. Holding his breath and a deep blush to his cheeks when she turned away as if she hadn't done anything. Troublesome. That did it for him. As soon as her step was made he swallowed and followed, lifting his hands to fix that pesky loose knot to her liking, slightly nervous now, but curiosity sparked in more ways than one. A cruel mistress, controlling and unapologetic in her work, and despite his eagerness to learn from her, he was sure his friendship with her would be brutal for his psyche. Everything else seemed to just be on fire every time he was in her line of sight. A puzzle like no other, and he got a front row seat to watch her during the battle. This woman blew through it all like a tornado. She didn't tiptoe around points and policies, she crushed them with pianate steps. Her voice, like velvet strings, sultry and enticing, melting hearts and starting fires. Her crowd watching at the edge of their seats as she proposed her image to be the only one they wanted, convincing the two men beside Kisame to nod their approval all throughout her show. The only delicate thing about her during the story was the way she moved. So sure, but soft in her graceful glides, as if she danced around the board and crowd, keeping the attention on her even as she talked plain numbers and statistics that could bore a regular crowd into eternal slumber. She didn't just prompt a second look, she held onto the gazes firmly, promising with each word spoken. Her vision, age-appropriate viewers that could be in for something new and exciting if they went with the foreign brand, proposing a thrilling mystery. Kisame sat back, listening, watching, eyes following her the entire time, hooked into the story with stern approval glinting in his eyes all the way until the end. A golden ring on his left hand glinting and a sharp black pinstriped suit to match his powerful position in the room. Temari had her win and could see it now, just one final move before her bow and a flashed grin to finish, matching the shark's top position. One question to change the outcome of it all. What else do you have? Quote. The gruff accent in his voice made the air in the office thicken. Shikamaru, who had been placed at her side of the table, forced his eyes off her once more to check on their audience, their opponent. CEO Kisame Hoshigaki, multi-millionaire and hidden criminal, those secrets tucked away from the public, but was revealed in her red notes. The only two to know about it was the one who wrote it and the one who had the privilege of reading it the night before. Excuse me, don't get me wrong, I like the angle you're working with, Miss Sabakuno, but I don't think it'll work with all of my intended audiences here in Konoha. A brief narrow of her eyes turned darker, focused, but threatening in certain lights. So it's the public that's your concern. We are selling a drink considered for adults here. He chuckled, glancing at his two minions who nodded along with him before he looked back to her, eyes dropped and lazily returning to hers as he spoke. My spiced variations need more developing palates interested, if you catch my drift. Your people last week did say you were more. She clicked her tongue, standing at the end of the table and tapping the top of one of the cans his company created with a nail, interested in the younger generati. On's take on your product. She resisted the urge to chuck the disgusting can into his face when he nodded. Start them young. Kisame cracked a smirk, her eyes rose to look back at his, that way they'll stay loyal and keep coming back for more. Quote. Shikamaru could see it, that fire. He realized quickly that it was anger, disdain, and disgust twitching in her eyes and her false smile fading into a hard line. You want us to promote dependency on your product to teens and young adults. A blunt accusation he nodded to. Think you can do that? She inhaled deeply, straightening her posture, faking a considering eye roll. I absolutely can do that. After all, I am one of the best in the business, she shared in his grin, just sweet enough to rot your teeth, before it fell and he. Our tone followed, but I won't. His smirk fell into nothing, quickly creasing into a confused anger at being told no. Yamanaka Marketing prefers to keep our image clean and we want to prevent any possible incidents with our intended audiences as you are suggesting. I am aware the age of drinking in Kiri is 18, but that is not true here in Konoha. It's 21 if you didn't know. You, a sharp tone to address him, however, don't seem to grasp the concept of morality in protecting this foreign public from the false view you wish to use. So no, she slowly shook her head, I won't be helping you and neither will this firm help you create that vile image in your head, so we no longer wish to do business with you or any one of your side companies in Kiri either. She tilted her head, and on a more personal note, Mr. Hoshigaki, your drink, she flashed a daring smirk, pleased with her insult, tastes like shit. The silence was thicker than ever, her eyes hadn't left Kisame's as he rose to stand and grunted a scoff. Fine, roughly fixing his suit jacket, he nearly growled in his words, if you won't do it we'll take our business to the new firm opened in downtown Akatsuki Marketing, she stated knowingly and glanced away showing nothing past her indifferent sigh, Itachi Uchiha will take you on, no pro. Blem, but I do hope your legal team is ready for the publicity it'll be getting once your drink goes into the wrong hands. It's easier to pay out a few lawsuits than take our product off the shelves and lose money. He headed for the door, ping her in the process. My deepest apologies for wasting your time, not meaning a single word of it, she went on, but I do hope you'll be able to recover after your reputation suffers the blow of all these potential lawsuits. It'll be a miracle if you pull through it with your sanity intact. She threw that smile back at them as they ped to leave. Gentlemen, have a good day. Watching them leave the room, the false smile held until the door closed. As soon as it fell, a slur of foreign words muttered under her breath. As she glared a hole in the door. Their company will be out of business in 6 months. Mark my words. Temari huffed and quickly addressed the staring idiot, stuck somewhere between shock and confusion, something like amazement just peeking through. You're making that stupid face again, Nara. Your approach was brutal. He fought to shut his mouth, snapped back into reality. I didn't think you'd refuse him as a client like that, so forgive the shock. She sighed heavily and braced herself against the table, looking at the cans before her. I have morals, standards, that I like to uphold here. It's not just the company that we are presenting but ourselves. Grabbing the cans in her hands, she walked over to the trash bin and tossed them away. We keep free of anything that can tarnish our reputation and risky promotions like what Kisame suggested as a lawsuit waiting to happen. Quote, sounded a bit personal, his causal addition making that knot in her shoulder tighten, flashing him a warning look. Don't know what gave you that idea, it's just business. She flicked her watch again, checking the time, choosing to ignore his frustrated expression at her thick wall-placed eye. En front, we've got some time before I have to leave to go to Sharingan again, so hurry up, I've got something for you to do. With a sigh, he followed those loud heels, keeping just fast enough to not be left behind or caught staring. She stepped out and he followed, routine at this point, just a short drop to the sway of her deep purple sleeveless dress at the end and quickly looking back at Matsuri as she rushed around the desk to follow her. Anything new? First question met with Matsuri searching a stack of files in her arms. Everything for Sharingan is here. She lifted the stack for her, gasped quickly and adding a new name into the mix, and Kankuro called to ask about this weekend, her mistress huffed annoyingly. I'll call him back later. You will have to confirm the tickets for me. You know I'll be busy this weekend so you won't have to do the scheduling until Monday. And Kiri? A curious ask and Matsuri shrunk as Temari glanced at her, anything but friendly in her growl. They can kiss my, adding in a foreign word he couldn't pick up on, pathetic disgusting men wanting to poison children. That bad? Matsuri winced at the next growl. That bad. A step ahead and she entered her office, leaving her eye stand at the door. Matsuri stopped her steps and flashed a quick encouraging grin at Shikamaru in ping as she went back to her front desk. A friendly little spy is what the girl had become to him, so small and innocent he could barely see the sharp fangs hidden behind her quiet smile, a perfect accomplice to her Mr. S who worked these rumors to her liking. Hurry up, Nara, as he stepped into his partner's office, forcing his groan to sound under his breath as she pointed back at him, door closed. Doing as told, avoiding any unnecessary arguments and making his way towards the GL, enjoying the view as he had mentioned last week, though that view seemed to wander as he waited. People crossing the street and entering local shops and stores, the city of Konoha busy as usual during its lunch hour. He took the time waiting to watch her, just a side eye from his half-hearted stare at the crowd below Where did you leave it, Matsuri? A hiss under her breath, scolding her eye stand as she searched in a new section of her file cabinets. When she bent over this time, he had the common decency to tilt his head away, his eyes peeled off her as he took a short inhale to force some sense of cover. It only got somewhat harder to breathe. Lewd he'd become lately, a little too open in looking so obviously, but he almost couldn't help it. No matter where he looked on her, his eyes dragged down every damn curve as if chained down and forced to follow the lines of her body. Controlled in her reality of temptation. This was not in the planned life plan, a cruel mistress he had to partner up with, a possible friend in the making, a woman who seemed to lack her own knowledge in the way she moved sometimes, or was she doing it on purpose like her walk? That point prompted another cautious look her way, now believing the latter to be true. She bit her lip, pinching the red stain under a fang, furrowing her brows as she searched another cabinet, searching deeper into her domain in hunt of whatever she was after. Just the start of his brow raising curiously, the curves taking his attention, she straightened with a stack of folders in her hand and broke him out of the trance. You know, most men have the common decency to not stare at my, Nara. Without bothering to look back at him, he inhaled deeply, counting calming seconds and releasing a breath, trying to play off the fact that he had been caught by rubbing the back of his neck. It didn't help in the slightest. The subtle blush was harder to hide when she looked back to him. Without addressing the matter in words, she stepped towards him with a manila folder in hand and stopped just as she reached his side, extending the papers his way, his reach left grabbing nothing as she held it back from him. Now that you've seen the start to finish done my way, it's time to get your own mention by doing one yourself. You're actually going to let me lead one. Suddenly he wanted to stretch further to grab the folder she kept away from him. Almost as if she was tempting him closer to her, hooked by the promise. Well, how else am I supposed to make sure my perverted partner is good enough to help me if he can't handle one project alone? She raised a brow, he sighed as she made the mention, no use in lying either. Back when I first started, Kakashi was my director and he taught me through doing projects from start to finish, alone. He said it was the only way I learned things, through pressure. And that is how I will test you. Quote, he couldn't let her have this one, the mention just enough to make him see the lie in her eyes. It hadn't been her idea, it had been someone else's. Kakashi told you to let me try one alone, didn't he? The glare tightened, fire not ice, and she huffed, caught herself. He called in a favor, she practically hissed it through her teeth, I've been told I'm a little stubborn. Bossy too, adding quickly to stop the new heat of the glare, an innocent grin to temper it further, I won't let you down. You better not. She glowered at the eagerness, something about it bothering her and forced her warning tone to show how serious she was. The Uzumaki brand is one of our best clients, and I expect you to put all your effort into this, got it? He nodded as she lowered the file for him to take it. How much time do I have? His focus set on the set of folders in his hands, taking in details along the way, finally his first real start. Enough trust to where he could do things on his own. 1 week from Friday, she sighed and dropped her eyes outside the window, glancing at the crowd as he had while she turned away to walk to her desk. I was saving the whole thing to be dealt with after our potential scandal problem with the Wicked Witch of the color red, but with the Sharingan alliance I'm managing, she forced it through her teeth, admitting she needed help, looking back at him, this time his eyes focused on the folder before him. I've got too much to do, so I could use a second set of hands. Think you can handle it? What are partners for? He looked up. Just a flash of that entitled grin, oh how she wanted to knock it off his face. Just don't make any mistakes, her warning just as he stepped back and towards the door. Same goes for you. Flashing his own smirk as he took his leave in the last word, shutting the door behind him before she could mention it or hide the flick of her middle finger at him. Another step closer to feeling more comfortable in that office space, motivated to impress not just the but her as well. Friday, 6:22 p.m. Damn Kakashi for calling in his favor. Letting the man have a chance. His arrogance came and went, just a bit too prideful to be where he was at times and keeping at her side rather than her back when he was told to follow. Temari ignored it past her hard looks, wanting to shove a hand and push him away, but he got his chance to start now and he wasn't giving up. Asking for very little and comfortable with what he got, darker eyes when he focused and a tense in his jaw as he concentrated on the strategic approaches Heather his or hers, watching her when needed and past her eyes when he wasn't. She called it since day one, a mostly predictable perverted man, same as any other. Entitlement giving him a lack of decency, it hadn't been once she caught him, but she didn't call him out every time, just that once to test him. It was always inevitable. During the last week he spent the entirety of his time stuck in that office, staying as long as she did, or as long as it took her to finally ask that Friday what he was still doing there on her way out. The click of heels stalking as she neared his opened office, the team gone for the day and her solitude feeling heavier as she realized he kept at his own pace, not just taking the project to work on, but pouring every ounce of himself in those pages, showing effort with his given path. It was admirable to her to see focus in such a way, it mirrored her dedication, and her standards, her need to prove she was better than the scum she crawled out of. But why was he so focused? He wanted to earn this, not just be given it, he wanted that mention as much as she did. She could make him second best, show a little of her hand and teach him a trick or two, as long as he listened. Her own little challenge doing as told, how was that not tempting? Though she supposed the moment she saw him seated at that desk, a darkened glare set on a folder from the stack beside she had to blink a few times to make sure it was real. That ink tie. Crooked. She hated it. She hated the way his suit jacket was carelessly thrown on the side of his desk. She hated the way his button-up fit him so well. She hated that the idiot rolled up his sleeves and the muscles toned themselves as he leaned against his hand. What are you still doing here? Her voice broke the subtle hum of the building they worked in, louder in the silence. I could ask you the same, but I already know the answer. He didn't bother to look up, quick on his return, dead set on the page before. Him. Glad to know your week in solitude taught you no manners. Despite the roll in her eyes, already on edge with him, he seemed to find her insult amusing, grinning to one side as he continued to list through the stack before him, searching for the right page in the silence between them. He had always been patient, mostly hiding it through a simple attentive observation perceived as lazy or slow, taking in details and making his own silent judgment during the processing, but knowing it was such a drag to actually act on those subtle looks. She did not ask, nor sought his permission, as she walked further into his office, arms crossed behind her and looking around. It was almost enchanting the way he saw her now. Like a shy fawn on his parents' forest property, he made no subtle movements, watching her toes tip on the carpet, no forceful stomps, eyes wide, curious, and taking in the additions of the space around her. A few simple paintings, various degrees, plants he found soothing to be around, and a game that helped him find his focus when his mind wandered. He held his breath for fear of scaring her away now. You actually did something with your office? Her simple question made as he looked down to the spot on the page he had lost the moment she entered. Just because I have to be stuck inside all day doesn't mean I can't enjoy the view. Glancing back up as he finished, he spotted her subtle interest on the shogi board he had placed on the coffee table, raising a brow at the self-played match, a little game to help him get some clarity from his given task. The view of the place did seem better now. Once again proving his theory right that she never wore pants, a purple skirt and flaring matching blazer that finished just above her waist. Heels made to match and that hair pinned back to hold her air of sophisticated composure, not a Florida W in sight. You know it's Friday, a casual mention, not bothering to look down this time as he made a move, one step closer to that story that had been bothering him from the start. Excellent observation, Mr. Obvious. Taking her eyes off the board, she glanced back at him, smirk and taunt at the ready. What's next? Are you going to tell me it's dark outside too? Making sure you didn't come in here to yell at me again, hiding the grin when she scoffed, turning to fully face him, her hands found her hips and his eyes followed. If I knew how much you'd whine about that, I never would have bothered to look your way. You are a mean friend, his conclusion coupled with a lazy smirk, pissing her off enough to step forward and come closer. We still aren't friends. The heels just barely shifting the carpet below. Not yet. Just erring on arrogance, just enough to raise her brow and take his challenge head on. Why are you so persistent in wanting to be my friend? Just the daintiest tilt in her chin, looking down at him from her stance as she came to the front of his desk. Because I keep secrets with my friends. And what secret do you have that is so irresistible to me that I would even consider it? Quote, I think I'll save that answer for another time. He resisted the urge to look down as she leaned forward just enough to flash that dangerous smile. You're going to have to try harder than this, Nara. Troublesome, he called it. You seem to be a little distracted. One of those perfect hairs fell, begging to be tucked back into her pinned bun, as if the mess was on purpose, not to bug her, but him. She hummed her silent judgment about him in the silence and headed for the door, not bothering to look back, ready to put a pin in the discussion. Taking her leave, pulling away from that desk and to the door, he relished in one final attempt to be friends. Good night, Temari. Stopping her step at the door, she gave a quick glance back and whatever 3 seconds it took her to think about it her response came out as ruthless as could be. Leaving its mark on him. Good night, crybaby. And he carried that smile all the way to his car, falling asleep that night with a spent heiress hugging his side and a stack of research to be dove into during the next week. Saturday, 4:28 p.m. Running away from his mother had become a skill he excelled at. Not 10 minutes after arriving with Shiho, Shikamaru had been cornered by the family and their persistent questions of how he's been, and where, and questions that made his head ache and proved to him that he could predict every single event the family hosted. One would think Ino's surprise engagement would be the topic of the evening, but after the people made their rounds, he was the second most interesting person there, his girlfriend a close tie for the spot. All eyes waiting to see what his move would be that evening. Running off on his own for a drink, as soon as their backs were turned, leaving his girlfriend in the kind hands of Choji and his sous chef turned fiancé, Karui. Knowing the two would keep her safe from the prying eyes and questions coming their way. He just needed a minute from the pace of it all, just a minute alone on that humbling trail beside the lake as the evening came down. 6 years he hadn't been back here, going abroad and alone to seek out that path they all wanted him to follow. It was a miracle he survived all of those years, but he had one person he had counted on back then. Professor Asuma Sarutobi had been the one to help him through it all, at least for those first 4 years. The tragic accident that cost him his life, taking a great man away too soon, leaving behind a widow and his soon-to-be 2-year-old daughter. His, not by blood, niece, Mirai, still receiving his weekly visits every Sunday. If today didn't go as planned, at least he had the day tomorrow to relax with the comforting thought. At his back a pair of Des, trailing after his shadow, kind and docile, ashy brown fur and big rich brown eyes, no. Ing the Nara name and his face since they were fawns. Now their company he didn't mind, they couldn't talk and make him question every decision, they could however nip at the back of his coat and warn him of the fourth set of steps following them. Shikamaru almost groaned out loud when he heard that deep rumble in his father's voice, like a game of hide and seek he always lost in the end. Your mother has become persistent. Shikaku blew a breath out, stopping at his side, as drained as his son looked. You don't say, his son huffed the obvious, she's become unbearable, more like it. Can you blame her? Shikaku sighed, another life lesson to be learned. No, he decided on logic to fight the irritation set on his face, releasing a heavy sigh. The doe that had been at his side moving from him to his father. The chirp of evening birds settling in and giving the pair a moment of silence to consider their options. You brought your girlfriend, his father noted, glancing at him carefully. Does this mean? His question cut off as Shikamaru shook his head quickly. There it was, that stupid family tradition of proposing on that enchanting oak tree by their privately owned lake. Each of the Nara men meant to bring a woman down to it and bend on one knee, promising loyal love until the end of time. If he heard another proposal story tonight, he might just gag again. I'm not proposing, his firm response only making his father nod slowly and hum. Is there a problem? No. He looked away from Shikaku. Is there a problem? He repeated, slower, more focused on the tense in his son's shoulders as he kept his gaze into the pine trees behind him. She's the perfect girl to marry. He stated simply, looking back to that cursed lake. Why are you waiting then? His question stumped him, looking back to his father, seeing the little nudge he offered to have him figure it out. I'm not ready, he realized. He just started his life, he just started the career he had been promised since birth, just starting and barely learning to walk in the shoes set before him. Shikaku sighed, deeply in understanding. There is never a perfect time for these things, it just happens, at least it did for me. Shikaku shrugged, taking a step closer to his son and stroking the back of one of the deer as he pet her. I knew your mother for all of 2 hours before I decided that that was the woman I wanted to marry. He blew out a breath, amused. Took 4 months for her to actually accept me though. What made you decide? The effort I wanted to put in. He smirked down at the doe coming to his side. I wanted to be better for her. It wasn't the money, or everything we own, I wanted to be a better man for her. He looked back to Shikamaru. I wanted to be worthy of a mention for her. Shikaku let out a deep sigh, letting his son soak it in before continuing. Your mother might be a bit harsh sometimes, but she means only the best for you. How do you handle a woman like that? Gently. Shikaku grinned fondly as the doe nudged the side of his pants, then his hand, seeking a treat, and instead offered a soft pat to her ashy brown fur, taking the affection, but still looking for food. I understand why you haven't been around much for the past year, but do us both a favor and at least try calling your mother every once in a while. He sighed, she misses you. I will. That small promise he could keep. Now let's grow some balls and face that woman. If we are gone any longer, your mother will kill us. Both men winced at the thought and took to each other's sides as they left, the deer parting ways at the forest end. Make sure we don't go anywhere near that tree. Shikaku only nodded once to him as they climbed the trail to head back to the party. During his evening, he settled on keeping tabs of where he was and who kept asking what questions to him, simple and quick answers, keeping his girlfriend at his left as he carried around the precious drink to aid his growing impatience. Now finding himself outside of a one-on-one conversation between Ino and Shiho, both women talking, but one stiff and uncomfortable as his, not by blood, Sister Ino patted his back and leaned close to him, her bright smile blinding and wide blue eyes searching for his secrets. So how's working been for you, Shikamaru? Exhausting. Simple and perfect answer. Who did you get to work with? She excitedly asked, leaning against her brother's arm, holding his drink firmer in his hand as she swayed his balance. Oh. Is it Kakashi? I love meeting him and his husband at Daddy's company events. No, it's Temari Sabakuno, one of the other directors. He could feel her grip tighten, on the verge of making him wince when she gasped. No way, she's your partner. Ino threw her head back in a shouted laugh. Shiho flinched at his side at the sudden pitch of her amusement. I take it you know her. He raised a brow to her, confused enough to ask. How would Ino know her? Know her? Ino blew out a breath and smiled wider. I love her, she's so beautiful and amazing and so bad. Grabbing a hold of his right arm, she leaned closer. You should have seen her, Shika. She's like the greatest woman anyone can ever meet. He blinked down to her. Are you sure we're talking about the same woman? His question left unanswered as Ino leaned away to look at the group around her and went on with her story. I went drinking with her once and to this day it's the best night of my life. She paused, glanced at her Ken doll fiancé and gave him a sweet smile. Second best, of course. Question was he curious enough to ask? At this point he would take any advice he could. Why? Quote, where do I start? Ino exclaimed, setting her drink down on the table as she told her tale. Apparently the woman had not lied about her abilities to kick someone. The night with Ino ended in a one-on-one brawl and a one-hit knockout that left the women to continue on their bonding endeavors with the help of drinks and shared secrets. Nothing leaked past her rumored sharp insight and intellectually brutal quick wit, all things he'd seen firsthand, but as the story went on, the arm to his left slightly tightened. So that's your partner? Shiho raised a worried brow at him, painted lightly and lips that same shade of glossy pink, cute. Yeah, she's vicious all right, he blew out a sigh, unaware of the subtle narrow in Shiho's eyes as he drank to the thought of that troublesome woman. Vicious. Ino scoffed, slapping his arm, he scoffed back to her. Her nickname is the Cruel Mistress, Ino, his point made, another annoying slap he almost groaned to. She's an absolute gem, Shika, Ino defended, boosting for her friend. I love that Daddy is helping her with her project, Temari is going to make such a difference in Konoha. And Ino gave just enough to hook his full attention. What project? He almost turned his head too fast, focused on the bright blues of his, not by blood, sister. You know the Southside project she's leading. She took his alert look and slowly grimaced. She didn't tell you, did she? She slapped her hand over her mouth, quickly dropping it. Please don't say anything, I was sworn to drunken secrecy. She covered her mouth again. Please, I promised her I wouldn't say anything about it until it went public. Was this the story his uncle had promised? Relax, I won't say anything. He went to sip his drink and paused. I'm pretty sure she'd kill me if I mentioned that. He lowered his drink. I'm still convinced she hates me. Well, she did have a pretty tough time when she started out. It explains a lot. Ino sighed, realizing she said too much and quickly stepped towards her fiancé. Forget I said anything. Come on, sweetie, let's go get some new drinks. Pushing herself and her nameless lover away from the duo, Shikamaru let out a sigh and finally drank from his GL, downing it all in one go. Is it tough working with her? It's not easy. A slow breath as he rewinded the past couple of weeks in his head. She's just so troublesome. He looked down at Shiho, shrugging, but if I want to do better at this job and earn it, I have to learn from her, because she's the best. His simple admission met with Shiho nodding slowly. Well, don't let her push you around, you're pretty smart, you know. The soft comfort she offered, like a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Yeah, he glanced over at the oak tree up the hill, that perfect girl at his arm and a sunset theme enchanting the water ahead of him. The perfect moment. We should call it a night. He guided the leisurely walk back to the steps into the house, a quick task of saying his farewells to his parents a priority on the list. You want to leave? Quote. Yeah, I've got a lot of research to catch up on if I want to have this presentation ready by Friday. He would not disappoint, he would do this right, no matter how much of a drag it was. You'll do great, just a drop of that disappointment from her for leaving that fairytale ending girls drive. Aimed about. Love you. Honeyed words he looked back at her with, small smile in place, but his mind elsewhere. Love you too. Monday, 9:52 a.m. The morning meeting came to an end. This week's installment of Kakashi teaching and Temari ignoring him, the children of the group left to learn and watch the parents throw their remarks back and forth over a new project. Sakura was fitting in better after her first week of guidance, Kakashi happy to take over now that the flow of work was going better. Less load, more space between breaks and deadlines being met on pace humans could manage. All that Temari could think about that entire morning was her stupid loose clip in her hair, missing a tooth and failing the perfect bun she required. One little mishap to ruin the entire day, like that damn torn stocking that one time, no coffee cups thankfully. The day a blessing and a curse. His focus down on the stack in his arms, Shikamaru didn't notice the pause in her steps until it was too late. Stepping into her back as they waited for the elevator, the folders dropped and grabbing her arm as he kept her from falling forward as he halted, just a kiss of bodies before she moved, not even allowing a chance for the moment to settle. Seriously Nara, are you blind? She turned ready to let him have it. Sorry. His distracted apology died down and his face verged on that stupid look she spoke about. It was like seeing a whole other person, like the day he got coffee spilt on him or when she bit his head clean off for faring to help her. During the collision, the hair that she had been holding to fix let loose and when she turned to throw her insult at him, he might as well have been blown across the hall. No longer perfect, at least to the world around them, messy and edged and as sharp as her glare, hiding the sides of her face and framing those eyes as they forced their heat on him, but it seemed to lack its desired effect. A terrifyingly wild and beautiful mess all around him. Not coffee spilt this time, but his papers scattered across the floor. With a resounding sigh, escaping her sights, he began the task of collecting them, cursed to be late again, only to hear the sound of that elevator go away and her to be grumbling those foreign curses again as she helped him collect the files. You know, if you're going to insult me, at least do it in a language I know. His muttered retort met with her own shot. I'll insult you in any language I want to. She threw back and grabbed the remainder as she stood back up to face him. You should watch where you're going next time, idiot. Shoving the stack in his occupied hands along with her spite, she turned to face the elevators, frustrated, returning to fix her hair and muttering a final curse to the day. Hate Mondays. On edge and ready to stomp everything in her way. Gently, his father had said. As soon as the doors closed to the elevator, he trapped her with a question and 6 floors to get an answer. Is something bothering you? No. Looking back at him, quick and with that warning glare, he persisted. What's bothering you? Slower, drawing each word carefully and still missing. Currently, you, a sharp remark made in that snap enough to let his sigh echo around the 4 walls of T. Had elevator. I take it your weekend wasn't great. It's none of your business how my weekend was, just a lower pitch to her tone, but still talking to him, a careful move to make an umption. That bad huh? It was silent until the 18th floor came. Among other things, one admission that showed promise in the approach, said quietly enough that he had to take a moment to dissect it before he followed her out of that elevator to their floor, going to his office and starting his day of research. To get things done by Friday. Wednesday, 10:21 a.m. His suit seemed to fit better with each day, the comfortable stance he showed now brimming with some kind of hidden power, readying for his own fight back. Addressing the team as needed, and keeping his clumsy eye stand at bay near his office. Potential, given the right motivation. His task given and she left him alone to figure it out, giving him this one chance to step up and show her he can manage things on his own. Temari worked all throughout the week in her reach for that alliance goal, among her other endeavors, hidden for now until it was time. Seeking to protect her own company and name through the deal being made and seeking to make a difference in the world they lived in, promoting those dreams she w. As once promised as a kid. The tasks done for the morning, a boring hour-long meeting about a client's desires to get his startup up and running and that draining meeting with Sasuke discussing numbers yet again. Inochi trusted her, Suan trusted her, and she could not disappoint them with the power they gave her. Sitting at her beloved desk, a pristine clean white, plain and neat, she went through the report before her, red pen at the ready to sniper any mistakes she saw. Before her Matsuri scrolled through the tablet, going over the rest of the day for her to strictly follow. No changes to the schedule, you're free until 1. Matsuri nodded to her, ready to run on her short black pumps, only making it halfway when impulse took over and she glanced back. You know, Temari sighed, but her eye stand kept going, as nosy as she was when she was 10, Mr. Nara is working very hard in the conference room today, I'm sure you'd like to take a look at his progress. Quote, Matsuri, I'm not his mentor, she glanced up at her, firmer now, I'm just making sure he can handle things on his own. Going back to her report she ran though a line and wrote to the side. Well I just thought, she tried again looking away with a sigh, if he could get some help he wouldn't. Be so stuck right now. Her pen stopped, Matsuri tensed. He's stuck. Well it looks like it. She shrugged meekly back at her and backed a step towards the door. I just thought he could use some help. She trailed off as Temari rose from her spot and let out a sharp exhale. Find me if anything changes in my schedule, I'll be in the conference room. Temari ped her eye stand as she grabbed the door, the air cold the instant it swung open. The quiet little grin turned into a smirk as Matsuri skipped her steps towards her beloved front desk. The moment the mistress stepped outside her door, the room settled into rhythmic taps of keyboards and heads down. The usual air of fear at whatever unscheduled move she was making. She admitted it in silence, her people were perfectly trained, some even deserving a mention from her, always on me and despite their fear they aimed to please her. A few clicked steps and a subtle glance down at Kiba, breaking a sweat while he stared down at his papers to avoid her as she made her way into the conference room. A room on her floor, belonging to her alone, and he had taken it, but why? Peeking into the opened room, her eyes quickly widened in surprise as she stepped in and looked at the mess. Not a stack, but stacks across one side of the table, lines from one end to the other, the tops printed with the logo of the Uzumaki brand. Closing the door behind her, another step in to allow the shock to fall off her face and find the culprit of it all moving from one board to the other, suit jacket set on the back of a chair, a simple white button-up, rolled up sleeves and that crooked tie that had yet to take her interest. When he saw her, his step paused and he acknowledged her presence. Good, you're here. What are you doing? Looking from the scattered mess back to him he took a step to the side. I would say working. He let the corner of his grin play out, almost amused by her stiff stance, but the look on your face suggests something else. It's a mess in here. He raised a finger at her, stopping her complaint. Organized chaos, he corrected, putting a hand at his narrow hips and looking around the room as he rubbed the back of his neck, giving his explanation. I had a lot of research to pull up for the Uzumaki brand, everything from past projects to how they presented themselves, so I can get a sense of what they are after. He looked back to the board, then her, seeking approval. What do you think? I think solitude has made you insane, her remark made, but focus set ahead. Looking from the board and back to him, she forced a subtle narrow in her eyes and stepped past him to take it in. His approach was so subtle and building, catching her attention through unpredictable moves even she had to pause and consider. He persuaded so carefully she didn't even know she was trapped in the flow of the point until the end. It was good. I hope you don't expect me to boost your ego by suggesting your planned out method is good enough for a run-through presentation. Casting a glance back at him, he scoffed, seated against the table now, ankles and arms crossed and waiting. I'd expect the end of the world to begin before I ever heard another, good job, from you. I don't praise mediocrity, she shrugged, fighting a twitch of her lip, hiding the grin behind her thoughtful gaze. Searching the thought-out plan with softer eyes as she flowed through his approach. Sometimes a mention can go a long way. Too calm for her taste, a smirk already in play. Do you need me to tell you you're a good boy and didn't up enterly? She raised a brow, no comment made, but fighting a smile as he glanced away, avoiding her now. How did your meeting with Sasuke go? He uncrossed his arms and braced himself on the table, pushing off to stand as he looked back at her, catching the quick suspicious surprise on her face. How did you know I had a meeting with him? Saw him in the lobby this morning, figured that's why he was here. He shrugged, crossing his arms as he glanced back to his work boards. We went to the same schools together growing up. Quote, her meeting with the head marketing director at Sharingan Industries, another entitled rich boy, opening new doors to the proposed alliance between their companies. The introduction had been decent enough, professional, but stiff on his end, aware of the role he was playing to get their company's there. Things going according to plan until the mention of deeper cuts into the prenup. Each company wanted to invest in the other. They wanted more, the order coming from their CEOs. The old men kept in the shadows to avoid direct and brutal hits. Is he always so serious? Taking the man's knowledge of the elites, Temari glanced back at him to seek her answer. I'm pretty sure he was born with that glare. He sighed deeply. He's pretty self-centered too, if I remember correctly. His hands creeped into his pockets as he looked to her, waiting a beat before asking, do you need any help with the alliance proposals? Actually, Sakura is helping me out with their proposal, a softer admission, inside pleased to admit she could handle these tasks with a few extra hands helping. Gee, I always liked the way she specified the details in her work, it's why I wanted her as a head instead of Tsunade's choice. And she let that reminder lower her tone enough. I told them all to Yuya was a bad pick from the start. Quote, what did Kakashi tell you? She sighed as he asked. He told me to give her a chance, so I did, because I trust him. She smacked her red lips, letting out an irritated breath, but I don't trust superficial people like her, fake and after things so petty as greed, she scoffed, turning to La Avenue. Money makes people do stupid things all the time. Glancing back at her, he hesitantly called out, thankful he had found a way to catch the eyes of her ice stand earlier. Getting her to come to him for aid, as partners should do. Before you go, mind taking a look here? She paused her steps, looking back at him. I have the whole concept, but I'm stuck between these 3 points. Your approach is more direct, so I could use a second set of eyes to make sure I do this right. Quote, her eyes narrowed as she turned, taking slow long strides, considering helping him, just a little stroke of her ego that he sought her opinion on the matter. She could let him fall on his face alone, let him fail her first chance he got, but she felt merciful and with a sigh agreed. Pitch me what you have so far, she decided and leaned back against the end of the table, crossing her arms and giving him her full attention. Most of it set on the presentation as he nervously began and slowly grew into a confident pace that held her quiet gaze. Somewhere along the way, her eyes wandered, watching the muscles flex on his bare arms as he moved from one board and stretched to the other to show her eyes where to follow. Following those long elegant fingers, ones who have never had to touch filth a day in their life, speaking calmly in SM. Uthly, just a touch of that raspy drawl, up until the problem his concept faced, the roadblock that he had yet to pee. Halfway through she just tilted her head enough, that crooked tie catching her gaze, she hated it, but her attention guided by the stretch in his neck while he spoke, mesmerized by the vibration of his Adam's apple as it made its note. He could even be considered handsome if you tilted your head and looked past the rebellion studs in his ears and the lazy smirk that showed just the flicker of his entitlement. A clean straight jaw and nose, a full bottom lip, taking a longer look to the physical if you could get past his ego, taking a deeper breath when his gaze wandered. Whether at the lack of regret in watching her move away from him every time she led, she couldn't quite decide if he was doing it on purpose or just caught up in the caution of her bold approaches. Temari knew better though, but playing around was the game sometimes, just a little lighter flash of her teeth to distract, or a subtle roll in her hips to taunt their eyes. She wasn't blind to it. Inside and outside of work, she played herself out to be forbidden fruit in a promise of paradise, prompting sinful desires without the follow-through, teasing to brighten up her day. ing with them, her brother would say, making them feel like she wanted them too. He, however, watched as a means of figuring her out. Her presence was distracting whether she wanted it to be or not, her team still fearful of those loud heels that made her grand approach menacing, that skirt always form-fitting and strict as she could be. The military approach was still her go-to, and working effectively for her eager to please workers, she might have been harsh, but it left the crowd yearning for her approval. Admiring the darker shades of gray on her body today, a dark smoky shade of skirt and a loose black top, always a button away from appropriate in his opinion. The heels as red as her pen and pursed painted lips that kept their shape all the way until the end. And when he looked back to her now, ready to receive her sharp criticism, she thoughtfully hummed instead, hiding her observation as she uncrossed her bare legs and pushed away from that table, moving towards him, her eyes turning to the board as she did, making him wonder if she had even paid attention. Change your point here. She moved one of the marks and swapped it with another, led with the audience rather than the product, make it more subtle. She glanced at him, crossing her arms, catching his attention away from his work. It's Actua. LLY, your approach that sounds direct. Really? He tilted his head and gave the points a harder look, stepping to her side to lean closer to the board, the distance almost a brush away from her shoulder. The smell of an old cigarette tickling her nose and making her crave one. If I change, he muttered as he stepped closer, if possible, moving around the points and diverting her gaze for a moment back to his bare arms. She entertained the thought for a fraction of a second, the sensual one that made a certain heat flicker to life at the back of her neck and trail its fire down her spine, threatening to release a breath and break the air of composure around her. It had been too long, a few months since she started that dream project, busy as she would always say. More like non-stop piles and piles of useless folders needing her attention and signature, making her forget what the outside world felt like some days. She even dared to entertain the idea of this friend in the making offering different benefits. Like a hormonal teen after her first kiss, it's all her mind suddenly could focus on, the dirty parts. Potential, given the right motivation. Impulse almost made her show it on the outside. Hey Shikamaru, the door opening and shout out of his eye stamp made her teeth grind, no courtesy knock to hide the open glare she shot back, you've got a call from Shiho again. Quote, again. Shikamaru paused and looked back, confused. When did she call before? About 20 minutes ago. The crease in his brow deepened as he pushed in his back pocket for his phone, letting out a groan when he realized it was dead. Damn it. He lowered the phone and rubbed his neck, sounding exhausted. Kiba, tell her I'll call her back. His eyes stand already out the door upon seeing her, she took her interest elsewhere. Question was she curious enough to ask? Who's Shiho? My girlfriend. He moved a couple steps away towards the table and paused when he heard the snicker behind him. You have a girlfriend? You seem surprised. He looked back, the smile drawing into a taunting smirk, teasing to brighten her day now. I didn't know someone could tolerate all that ego you carry around, willingly. His eyes rolled as she let another slide. She must be a saint for dealing with you. Safe to assume you don't have some guy waiting for you at home. He threw a mocking grin back to her amusement. If that was a shot at me for being single, then it was a bad one. Glancing back to the board, she settled with her grin and gave her admission, besides, I like being alone, no one to bother me. Quote, sounds lonely. One of those infamous casual comments that annoyed her. I've got plenty to deal with outside of work, so a boyfriend would just get in my way. Firm in her final say, she only looked back when he got too quiet. Is this your approach to everything in life? He fixed the end of his sleeve and began to button it. If it gets in your way, you just knock it down without giving it a chance. Is this another one of those attempts to try and be my friend again? She raised a brow at him, waiting as he finished the last button and offered the faintest twitch to his lips. Did it work? No, she scoffed, unimpressed by the attempt. Taking his loss, he stepped back towards the door and left her alone in the mess. A girlfriend. Every closer observation came tumbling into her. How dare she let herself have such a stupid thought? Of course the rich boy would have some kind of woman hooked on his arm. Temari could already see her now. Tall, blonde, probably a model like Inochi's daughter. That was if the man was superficial. Guessing by the way his lewd eyes dropped every time she walked, talked, or breathed near him, she could almost assume that was the exact type of woman he was after. That was the typical women most men dreamed about. Unless he preferred the less troublesome women he had said were worth the effort, easy, happy with complacency, and just downright boring in Temari's books. Not a thought going through their heads beside the desire to breath and nod along. Probably an heiress with good blood and loads of money to her ancient lineage, one of those names everyone knew around the city. Temari was anything but simple. Complex and daring, difficult to handle, slapping a beware sign on her to anyone who neared. Years of fight or flight built into her very bones and a shouted desire to be on top just to spite them all. Only as deep as the ocean's bottom that even her own mind couldn't comprehend some days. She wasn't made to survive, she was made to thrive in any hell that came for her. But a taken man was forbidden. Her head tilted at his work again. At least a married one was. During her internal debate, the phone she left on the table buzzed as she reached for it, eyes stuck now on the next point, until she peeked down and saw the flashing image of her youngest brother on her phone. "Hey you," the brighten in the tone was inevitable, happy to hear from the youngest, doting, her middle brother would say. "Hey Temari," Gara began and let out a quick sigh, "sorry to call while you're working." Quote, "I'm always happy to hear from you, what's up?" She crossed her arm and relaxed into the phone, waiting to hear what her brother needed. "I won't be able to come to dinner on Friday." The joy edged into a thin line as she listened. "I've got the finals next week and figured I can spend the weekend studying to catch up." "No worries, Gara, I understand. We'll see you for break in a couple of weeks." "Well, I have that study abroad in Kumo," he drew out cautiously, breaking a little crack in the ice barrier as she held back a groan for forgetting. "Oh right, I forgot. Well, have a good time and be safe all right." She paused and smiled quietly into the phone, "Both you and Lee." She couldn't see it, but she knew a tiny smile was playing on his mouth with her addition. "I'll call you and Konkuro later, love you." "Love you too." She could feel the pause behind her after she shut the phone off and glanced back in warning to the new arrival, back to his organized chaos and cautiously gauging the mood of the room as he entered. That sounded personal. "It was my brother," hardening her look just enough, but he either ignored it or didn't notice. "Right, you said you had brothers," he nodded to himself, keeping a dragging pace towards the boards. "Did they still live here?" Quote, a sigh and she let a crack in the ice break further. "One does, he owns a car garage in Southside, the other is off at college, studying to be a lawyer." She brushed the prick off her shoulder, only problem, it seemed to be stuck. "He's going abroad to Kumo during his break and we won't see him for a while." He nodded slowly, waiting for her to say more, talking a bit easier as he waited patiently for her to finish. "We were supposed to have the weekend together before he went, but he's got finals so it'll be better for him to stay on campus." Now she craved that cigarette for a different reason. She flicked her watch to check the time and let out a heavy sigh, catching his attention as she turned to leave, command at the ready as she ped him. "Hurry up, Nara. Where are we going?" His question left unanswered, he scrambled to grab his abandoned dark gray jacket as he followed after her, curious to see what his partner was after now. Heads down, keyboards working, Temari went straight for the front desk, Matsuri pausing her search or a paper upon seeing her. Off schedule, waiting for Matsuri, she lifted her hand expectantly as her assistant rummaged her desk drawer and handed her a key. That quiet smile following the pair as they entered the elevator. Before, Temari would always stop and stand her ground when entering, this time taking to the left side and using the key to unlock the forbidden floors on the top. Clicking on the 25th floor and stepping back to stand beside him. The rooftop, he realized, readjusting his jacket to fit better while he thought of her endgame now, once again as unpredictable as they came. "Why go here? I like the view," she called back as she stepped into the rooftop patio. Heading straight to the end of the garden and to one of the potted plants, bending carefully behind to grab a hidden pack and lighter, "Plus I stashed a pack here for times like this." "You smoke?" He could never tell, some spiced foreign perfume always waving his way when she walked, not floral. Not cute, following her heels on the concrete walkway and towards the end where parties were hosted. Grand events he remembered as a kid, decorated from top to bottom in whatever theme his mom and aunts could come up with. From holidays to big company events, this place had always been designed in an ancient enchanted theme of white marble and perfectly green topiary, designed to feel rich and powerful, and old money meets new feel to the place. Only occasionally and when I'm stressed. She paused and pursed her lips, or when I drink. Eno's mention suddenly coming into view, he couldn't wait to get that story from the woman before him. One glance and she tilted her pack towards him, as if following some common cutesy rule. Not the brand he used, hers holding a lighter taste and less of a feel in his lungs. He took what she offered, almost holding it like a gift, not a bomb, but it still could kill him. Taking her own, she looked out into the city lines briefly and dropped her gaze to the task at hand. The damn lighter's flicker dying right as the third swipe, she could almost swear it was Monday, but before the anger could settle the wave of smoke came closer to her, and a new light flickered. Here, he sparked the flame from a scratched silver boxed lighter, letting the light dance before her. For a moment before she leaned forward and inhaled. An instant buzz of calm washed over her, though the heat remained as she watched him inhale, the end taken so carefully between his lips. Aren't you a little too young to be killing yourself with these? Quote, bad habit I picked up when I was in freshman year, he shrugged, you're not that old yourself, you know. He tried and failed, her straight face never giving away the trick she played. You try working at a strip club until 3 a.m. every weekend for 2 years, you're bound to pick up a bad habit or two over there. Just the brighten to her day she needed, that stupid surprised look on his face breaking every line in the shocking reveal that she could barely hold back the laugh, that buzzed better than the nicotine. Caught between the surprise and the way the laugh bounced off her shuddering shoulders revealing a whole different woman. He managed that word for his unfinished question, before she shook her head, dimming down to answer. I was the bartender and occasionally the bouncer, adding casually with a shrug, the kicking mention again. He nodded slowly following the story, the tips helped pay for rent and it worked around my CL schedules. Quote, you should have just led with that. He took a drag to cover up the mental image, working itself towards lewd the more he unwillingly thought about it. Not new, but still a dirty thought a taken man should have not thought about. Having just talked to his girlfriend not 10 minutes ago, the little uneasy guilt quick to settle in at the reminder. And miss the stupid look on your face. Not a chance, Nara. She hummed the last of her amusement and took a slow inhale, aware of his eyes dead set to the end of the cigarette ad. Her lips, her cheeks hollowed out as she took a breath, taking the time to consider, creating her own plan and getting a step ahead. Your proposal is good, rough around the edges, but you have 2 days to smoothen it out, so focus on convincing their chosen influencer that you've done this before. He looked away, glancing at the city skyline, taking a moment to think before asking. Hooked. Do you know who it is? Not a clue, honest and inhaling once she blew out the smoky breath with her exhale and flashed a dangerous grin at the idea, but I can do you a favor and figure it out B. Why pulling a few of my strings around here? That means I'll owe you one. He furrowed his brows deep and cautiously looked at her, forced to look past those eyes again. Sell your soul to me, I won't disappoint. A taunting devilish remark, the brighten in her day as his focus dropped to the red-lipped promise and he took the time to consider. I'll take you up on that offer. Then we have a deal. She stretched her right hand to him, breaking the seams of the fanged smile, nothing cute about it, she. Kamaru. Her beauty, a gun, and that smile, her trigger. And he stepped forward to shake hands with the devil. His cigarettes stubbed out and the air of composure returned. It wasn't he who watched her walk away this time, but Temari as she stopped her steps at the front desk and leaned again. Saint it, just a slow enough blink that followed the man until he reached the conference room to resume his work. Admittedly, she did find he had a cute butt on his departure from her. She gave him just enough to keep him on that hook, just enough to where she could get a better understanding of who this man really was and what he really was after. Matsuri. Her eyes stand quickly looked up at her name, Temari humming an amused note under her breath, I need you to go and collect a few of my favors. Quote, what do you need? Matsuri nodded along as Temari spoke low and in Sunian, giving the task of finding out who the influencer and their companions would be. At one point last week she heard a rumor about a new face to the Uzumaki brand, one that she would have found out on her own had she kept he task for herself, but now it was time to cash in her own favors to get a firm hold on this partner of hers. Whether for her own personal gain or her professional one. Matsuri hummed to herself as she dropped down to floor 13, stepping out in a skip and walking past the front desk of the floor without bothering the receptionist as they watched her with caution. She might as well have been Temari entering the room, her eyes stand a spy and sly reminder that secrets couldn't be held long in the company, they would eventually come out if the wrong people got their hands on them. And Temari saw it all for the woman who sat just on top of her, the shadow at Inochi's back, games her directors would play, and Tsunade allowed it. A simple knock to the head of Human Resources door and Matsuri stood back waiting for his approval, entering and coming to stand before the desk. The occupant letting out a groan as he faced her. "Ah, it's you," Neji muttered, huffing under his breath to ask, "What does your mistress need, Matsuri?" Matsuri handed a folder to him and quietly smiled, waiting as Neji skimmed the brand logo on top and looked back at her, interested now. She's calling in her favor for information on who the new influencer in the Uzumaki brand company is, she'd like it by today if possible. Neji hummed under his breath and nodded, accepting his task. "I'll ask around. Now go." Brushing her off annoyingly, he glared back into the desk when the door shut, covering his eyes with a groan. Had he just been more careful, had he kept 10-10 from trying to defend him to her, maybe things would have been different, but with this position he held and to protect the company he had to have a hold somewhere useful to those on top, and what better position than the one where he could hide their sins. Human Resources. Then again, his 9 to 5 was just a job, worth the sacrifice of stagnancy, his true hidden happiness would walk out those doors with him at the end of the night as they always had, and Temari would stay in her domain unbothered and hiding their secret. Getting what she wanted and what they needed. Ruthless, cunning, and a step ahead, he had to at least admire her desire for the top spot, even if he didn't like the means in which she got there. Playing dirty to get what she wanted. Once the black sheep of the company, she now set the bar for the new standard everyone had to follow. Grabbing his phone, he leaned back into his chair, swirling around to look at the view from the 13th floor, and blew out IGH as the dial rang. A man answered. "Neji, what can I do for you?" An elegant low voice meeting Neji's call. "Sigh, I've got a favor to cash in." "Who from?" he curiously asked. "Who do you think?" A short pause, a little breath of realization. "Temari actually wants to accept my offer. Apparently, lover boy." Neji sighed. Doing her bidding as their deal required him to. "So, do you accept?" "Of course, I'll make my way up there when I get some free time." Wednesday, 4:32 p.m. If she had just bit her lip one more time, he was afraid he would be persuaded to jump off that table and come closer to her. He had nearly leaned closer when she wrapped her lips around the end of that white cigarette and shut her eyes just to inhale the starting smoke. Resisting whatever this urge inside was whispering him to do, or what to keep fighting, ignoring this attraction with a sharp nudge so he could focus of her distracting presence. Like a magnet, she somehow pulled him to her and he didn't understand the reason why. Then her eyes. Those eyes. Even now he sat back at his desk contemplating the damn shade the two colors had created, so damn complex that logic seemed to evade its boundaries. Why couldn't he figure this out? The lips too. What the hell was so fascinating about lips? All they were used for was talking and kissing. Wondering what it felt like to carry around the red mark on his skin if she just leaned closer. Not pink, not cute. Was she as rough as her edges? He covered his eyes with his hands and groaned, digging in until he felt stars. Not this thought again. No, he couldn't think like this was considered wrong. It almost made him feel sick to his stomach thinking that he would go home later and lean down to kiss his girlfriend hello and have his mind wander to that demonic smile from hell when he shook those soft manicured hands and made a deal with the devil herself. Whatever the favor would be, he'd have to follow through with it. And that terrified him deep inside, because all he wanted now was to know what unpredictable move she would make. A chance to be a step ahead is what she offered, but he wasn't far from her final destination. This is how the place worked. Favors cashed in and rumors made from those who had too much free time on their hands, at least that's how he saw it, needing to make a mental note to ask Kiba about it later. A knock at his door followed by the turn of the knob brought him back to reality, Not waiting for his response, it swung open. A breath taken to pull away from the stare he had burned into the pages of the one concern of his final presentation had. Was he sure this is how he wanted to make his first real debut? The roadblock she had helped him with earlier had a new view, a new path to take, but how could he achieve it? It's like he was missing a piece. Gliding in, never seeking his permission and shutting the door behind her to throw a grin his way when he looked. Hiding something behind her back as she made her way closer to him, steps so slow, he swore the sway of her hips was on purpose. There she was, the devil coming to collect her favor. Say it, sultry her tone, drawing him in on the first remark. Say what? He began cautiously, leaning back in his chair to watch her approach, locked in on those eyes. Say, she drew out, thoughtful, a prideful smirk playing on her lips. I'm the best. She paused in front of his desk, waiting expectantly, something about the playful gesture making him grin as he did as told. You're the best. With that she showed her hand and slapped a manila folder down on his desk, the Uzumaki logo on top, throwing a triumphant grin with it as she explained. Your audience is another rich kid, Naruto Uzumaki, the son of their previous company's owner, Minato. She huffed with a mutter under her breath, another case of nepotism. Apparently he's going into promoting the clothing line starting next quarter, he hasn't gone public just yet. So they are testing their heir to the brand to see how he does. Quote, you're kidding, right? Taking the folder, almost like a kid on Christmas opening a present, she stood back and watched him. Slowly his gaze wandered off the pages to look ahead. I can't believe that kid actually made it. Quote, of course you would know him, she muttered. Know him? He scoffed and leaned back in his chair, looking back to her. Naruto Uzumaki is the son of a billionaire, it's hard not to know him. His family practically built this city. He makes my family's money look like pocket change. She scoffed, amused by the admission. That kid can't walk and talk at the same time, yet here he is being groomed to manage a multi-million-dollar company. His brows furrowed, humming to himself, honest in his response, I'm actually a little proud of him. This was just the missing piece he needed, to make the presentation's direction go a whole new way. A question pulled him out of his thoughts. Will you be able to handle this? When he looked back up to her, the subtle feel of her cold exterior showed, serious. Your lack of faith in me hurts. Her look further hardened, before he let out a sigh and nodded, understanding her message. Don't worry, I won't make you look bad. She inhaled and blew out her breath, contemplating and reaching up to tuck her loose bang behind her ear, strolling past his desk towards the window. It's not me that I'm concerned about, she admitted and crossed her arms, slowing to glance out at the street. A subtle stiffness in her shoulders when she looked back at him. My first presentation for this company was a disaster. She glanced away and shrugged. It's why I don't work with partners. She looked back at him. I can't trust others to handle things on their own, so that's why Kakashi let me work by myself after my first presentation. He's heard about that rumor. She was a mistress before she was cruel, at least that's what Kiba had told him. A story of simple teamwork with the newest employee, one who tried to fit in, turning into a scandal when the anger peaked at their partnership. And people began to fume things about the new arrival. All because the man carried around a golden band on his left hand and his advances had been stopped by a woman from Southside who had had enough. Temari hadn't just sat back and taken it, she embraced the rumors and made them as cruel as she was. Walking around with the proud scarlet A on her chest and freely holding nothing back afterwards, gaining her top spot in the big leagues soon after. The cruel mistress born of necessity rather than willed into existence. Before he could respond, she took over his thoughts and spoke low enough to make it a warning. I don't do favors for just anyone, Shikamaru. Heading for the door, not bothering to look at him now, she showed just enough to make it be felt, so don't disappoint me. Any advice? He called out, just pausing on of those heels as she reached for the door, slowing to answer. Don't think of it as a presentation, think of it as a show, so perform, show them something they want more than money. What do I owe you for this? She threw a smirk back, softer, just matching her amusement at the reminder. I think I'm going to save it for another time. He called it the moment she spilled her coffee on him and looked up. Troublesome. Thursday, 8:32 a.m. She was right. He was insane. He concluded that theory when it hit him yesterday, or was it this morning, that one stupid little mauve he made on the shogi board at home in the late hours of the night threw him down a spiral like no other. College had been a breeze compared to this new discovery. His girlfriend complaining that he was up until 2 in the morning didn't even make a mention in his thoughts. Forgetting to shave and empty the full ashtray, he didn't even remember to grab a coffee to go. Following whatever path he made for himself with her aid. First in the office that morning and with some newfound energy, he didn't bother to tell anyone but Kiba of his current task. His eyes stand helping him bring in new reports to check out and new boards to make that image in his head stand out, the vision he had beyond just a mention, a revolutionary idea if he wanted to be kind to himself. A risk if he wanted to be honest. The Uzumaki brand was a line of clothes and accessories made for the rich, for his people, and money made people do stupid things. He needed to broaden his mind, his audience as well. Her voice cut through his thoughts only long enough for him to acknowledge her presence. Looking back once to see her, skirt, blazer, and hair pinned as usual, now leaning against the doorframe, brows subtly furrowed as she looked from the new mess to him as he returned to his task at hand. Rumor has it you've gone off the deep end. Rumors hold some truth to them, don't you think? Not waiting for her answer, his pace hadn't stopped, stepping back, remembering where he had the next point going before returning to pin it, he didn't even realize she had closed the door and start. Dita walked towards him, slow and almost cautious in asking as she made it to the end of the conference table. You threw out your entire concept, why? Because it was too focused. I needed to broaden the audience, not point out specifics. He looked back to her, hesitant. Last night I thought about what you said. He turned away, an almost shy admission following. People are greedy, all they ever think about is money, not what kind of difference they could make with the power they have. He gripped the back of his neck, aware that her intense gaze was quietly staring back at him, asking for more as her arms crossed. So why would we only promote to one type of people? We needed to be more humble and think of the long term versus short term, you know, this season versus last season. The confusion still edged on her features. He stepped towards her and tried and failed to explain once more. Just look, please. He gestured to the board and her eyes finally shifted off him to follow the new plan. The silence as she looked through it, deafening, his heart racing in anticipation at what she would say. Her conclusion, a sharp breath exhaled. The Uzumaki brand doesn't tailor its lines to the general public, Shikamaru. She emphasized with a huff, as if she'd faced the same battle once before and lost. They are very exclusive. Maybe they should expand, he insisted, trying to convince her now to see his side of things. Imagine if they just cut their prices by half, we could market them into a whole new era of prosperity. They won't fall for this, they are too selfish. She shook her head, slowing as he grinned back at the board, almost sly in its intent. Naruto will. He glanced back at her. If he's going to be the next head of their company, then I'm going to focus on convincing him that this is the direction his name brand should be going with. He sighed, reminded of those early years with his private school's most popular student. I know him well enough to know that he's a firm believer in charitable work, giving back. He paused and grinned, he's a good guy and he'll make a go. OD face to the brand as long as we can convince him that this is a better way for people to believe in the company his parents made. Because she had given him this new audience, she gave him a mention worth the effort. Making a difference as long as he could follow through with his plan, hoping he wouldn't be late this time. I want to do it this way, because it makes a difference. He stated firmly. She turned to face him, locking his eyes with hers, peeling away at whatever crack he would show, but he stood as unmoving as she was. Are you sure about this? His response was instant. Yes, I am. He stood straighter, proud in a way to finally have his answer, to have figured out his limits and finding a way to reach new ones. This confidence, this fire that nearly matched hers. It did things to her. Temari sighed heavily. You can't do this. Making her blunt conclusion, he nearly gasped when she turned and pointed to the board. It's too messy and unorganized. She stepped away from him and scoffed a laugh, throwing a shot at him. Honestly, is this how you think sometimes, Nara? Because it looks painful. He didn't get a chance to respond. It's going to take you a week at minimum to get this done and have it ready for the Presentation tomorrow. But, he began trying to go back to his point, but she wasn't stopping. But nothing, and just when he thought he had failed, she sighed loudly. You need to get the team involved to help with the workload. It's too much for one person, so if we want to get this done by tomorrow, we've got lots to do. I thought you said I would have to do this alone. She faced him, her chin lifted and she put her hands on her hips. He didn't flinch, but the look made him stand straighter. Are you my partner or not, Shikamaru? He nodded slowly, faster after she narrowed her eyes, then let me show you how it's done. With a flash of her grin, confident and softer on its edges, she pointed to a stack of unfilled folders and he quickly got the request to grab it as she carried E1 next to his towards the door, dropping it on Kiba's desk and turning to face the team. Her hands found her hips again and she inhaled to make her presence known. Everyone stop what you're doing. Quote. Addressing the team in a commanding shout, everything went silent, the air no longer cold, but set ablaze as she spoke. We have a deadline, so stop whatever project I have you on and help Mr. Nara accomplish his project, the word enough to tense the air further, the crowd at the edge of our seats. We need it done by tonight, overtime will be paid accordingly, no one is leaving until we have a presentation ready for tomorrow, am I understood? An audible sea of agreement met them and she nodded. They each made their way towards her and eagerly took one of the files from Kiba's desk, each given further instructions by their directors as they did. With their new IGN ments in hand, the place suddenly buzzed with a different energy, no longer fearful, but busy hands seeking to please, encourage. To seek their leader's approval. Her paean in it fueling their work drives, friendlier if you tilted your head to the side. Matsuri. From her spot she called out to her assistant, the little woman already lifting her tablet to type. You know the drill, cancel all my meetings and make sure no one has to leave. We can't be late. Yes, ma'am. With her firm nod, she turned away. Matsuri hid a grin behind her tablet and tapped her short pumps to the front desk, ready to order coffees and lunches, ready to call down to the other departments for whatever information her mistress needed. So what do we do? Shikamaru glanced around the busy room and back to her, meeting that expectant look as she stepped toward him. We go clean up that board, it's a mess. She grabbed a hold of his arm, a firm grip he noted, and dragged him a step into the conference room, following after her now as she made her way to the boards. A new paean in her steps, a new task given, and she stepped into it with everything she had to help him out. Stripped off her blazer, she set it to the chair next to his and checked her time on that golden watch. A new admiration shone in the way her focus shifted, like the start of a battle. She was ready to face this challenge head on. Now only if he could focus back on his work and not at her. Shikamaru, she snapped her fingers and brought him back. Stop making that stupid face and hurry up, walk me through this thing so we're on the same page. Quote. You got it, partner. Friday. They had worked the entire day until nearly 10 that night to have things set and ready for him, his partner's aide making a week's worth of work ready in only half a day. The team had left exhausted, but proud of their work, even more so when Temari had thanked them at the end of the day. Praise so rare they would carry it with them the rest of their lives. It was almost fascinating to watch her throughout that day, working alongside him and making any mistake became known in an instant. His idea was made to flow like a straight river along with her rough around the edges encouragement to kick him in the when needed. When the woman worked, she didn't just make suggestions, she made him think on them, she made him curious to know more, making him think deeper into he details of each point, to create a story as she did. She made working easy, not staring back at her when she did anything out of character was much harder. He was sure it crossed some lines that went beyond this friendship he sought from her, but at times he could barely feel the guilt of it. She was temptation in clicking heels, physical of course, but those sharp teeth were warning enough to stay away to anyone who didn't see the meaning behind it. As her nickname suggested, she was a cruel mistress, though even they needed moments to take a breath and return to reality after being caught up in her own story. At one point those heels had come off, her sleeves rolled up and just a glimpse of another woman had entered the room. One who didn't bother to glare at his crooked tie throughout the day. Working hard didn't scare her, the woman swam in the deep end, fighting its pull and escaping its dark depths just for him. To help him in this path he chose for himself. It did things to him. The day of the presentation, he had started his morning staring back at the full-length mirror in his B.D. room, contemplating every life decision that got him here. To the path he set for himself. A suit made for special occasions such as this, a dark emerald green and a tie to match, simple and clean like the rest of his look, and on a more personal note, his favorite color. Soothing too. Temari would probably get that look on her face if he left his tie loose now, one of the first things she always looked at when addressing him. With a sigh, his hand raised and neatly tightened the knot, the feeling of being choked coming after. Damn, he didn't realize he'd be this nervous, and for something as simple as a presentation. He's done countless of those, never once had he been scared, if anything they had just been a drag to get through. This was different, it had more meaning, more memory to hold, something to treasure or something to look back on and berate himself with if he messed up. Asuma would have encouraged him, but never in a way where he would get it on the first look, he needed a second just to understand what it meant. And he had made him think, made him curious and made putting effort into things less of a drag. Less troublesome. Shikamaru couldn't wait to tell this tale to Mirai on Sunday. Good or bad, she'd give him a big hug and possibly babble about wanting him to sneak more sweets her way when her moth-R wasn't looking. His view in the mirror added a new figure, a woman as tall as his shoulders and carrying a pink cup of pale coffee as she neared his back. Dressed in a luxurious silk robe and smiling fondly. Good luck today. A bare-lipped kiss placed on his cheek with some effort as Shiho stood on her toes to come to him. Thanks, he muttered, swallowing down the knot again, still there. Maybe tonight we can celebrate your success. Hugging his arm, Shiho smiled up to him, cute and sweet, always kind and encouraging, sometimes soft-spoken and nervous as he felt now. Well, first I have to actually get through it without making a mistake. Showing just enough of his internal conflict, she stroked his back and showed her concern. Isn't your partner going to help you? No, I'm the lead this time, so it's all on me. He nodded to himself and made the first step to start his day. I can't disappoint her, so I have to do this perfectly the first time. Quote, you'll do great, she nodded confidently to him, giving him some ease from the stress. Taking the first step out the door, he left her, waving back as she blew a kiss and watched him head towards the elevator. Her smile dimming the moment he was out of sight. She carefully sipped at her coffee, and thought about the nights of the week, when he actually would be home. Shiho knew he had an obsessive streak, just this week had proved it, focusing on one task and giving it everything he had, as long as he wanted to put the effort in. Just going through finals week with him had been an introduction to what she hoped to marry someday. Unfortunately for her, when he showed his interest elsewhere during one of these moments, he could forget about the details right in front of him. At that point a guide had been needed, someone to nudge him in the right direction. At one point it had been her to be there at his side, helping him back into the elite scene with a nervous step together and a display of what their future would hold as a promised husband and wife duo. Her father's stern demands for a perfect daughter answered when Shiho chose who she would carry on those precious family lines with. Since he started this career path, he had changed. Focused most days, willingly working more, less complaints and something similar to a haste in every step, as if he would disappoint everyone if he made a mistake or failed. She had barely gotten him to agree to take a step forward and move in together, some days still preferring his solitude and that shogi board his old professor had gifted him on his bachelor's graduation. The grand piano in their penthouse, left untouched for months. This new pawn, this new path he set for himself seemed to fuel a whole new step forward, and Shiho feared that she couldn't keep him from forgetting those details again. She feared she'd be left behind if he went beyond their circle. Whoever this woman he was partners with was, she didn't trust her anywhere near Shikamaru. Everything would go according to plan today. Ready inside and out, just hiding the nerves under his carefully confident stance that morning, the presentation ready to be delivered. That's if he could hide his confusion at the unpredictable moves she would make that day. Pants. Why the hell would the woman choose today of all days to wear pants? The click of those black heels still announced her presence, but there was no skirt to sway with her body covered as much as hidden curves would let her, the shade an off-white blazer included and with a black dress shirt buttoned up all the way to the top, just peeking the skin of her neck and hiding the rest. Lips a devilish red and eyes that could still freeze a room, but the temptation hadn't subsided, instead it intensified with the theory that she was hiding something. Why would his challenge within a challenge do this today? He almost let his pout hang on his lip when he first saw it. He wanted to ask, he needed to know, but as he mixed his nerves with the presentation and her hard look pointed at the door of the elevator, he gave up on the curiosity. At least for now. It's not like she would say anything useful, probably find a way to mock him with it, or worse. He glanced at her, just a subtle side eye, concluding that worse was a possibly. Temari knew he looked at her. Every man did, calling him out that one time, but with no warning behind it, just a simple observation she entertained when bored enough. The reminder that he was taken didn't cross her mind much. Hell, she spent the entire day yesterday forgetting about the world to invest all her time and effort just for him, just to have his story be told the proper way, and he returned the favor by hanging on every word she advised and making this dream into a reality. It was better than good. It was genius. She dared herself to think about telling him, but not yet. Are you ready? Finding her ask a little easier to say, he let out a sigh, tense still in his shoulders since he walked in that morning. Yeah, just a little nervous. Don't show it on your face. Pause and take a breath if you have to. She nodded to him, and gave her final analysis on their audience, their opponent. Naruto is new and young, meaning his advisory board will try to influence his decision every chance they get. He will also question everything you say, so that they can control his final vote in the end. She looked at him, catching eyes and holding on. You have to be a step ahead and make sure they don't win. Quote. Got it. He nodded once, collecting his thoughts, still so damn caught up on the feeling of it all. Thanks for the advice. And Shikamaru. He looked at her, this time calmer as she pointed out his one flaw. Fix your tie. Looking down, not realizing he had tugged it loose earlier, he quickly raised his hand to tighten the choking knot and mentally shook himself to step out as she did. One last look at him, just catching the way she inhaled quietly and readied herself as well, and they led together. Awaiting them, a group of 5 suits with stern faces, some aged, others getting there, but one blonde stood out. Naruto spotted wearing his designer brand and colors that lit the halls, a smile plastered on his face and growing wider when he saw Shikamaru. Mr. Uzumaki. He raised his hand as he made that last step. Shikamaru. Naruto went in full force, hugging Shikamaru tightly, his handshake forgotten. I haven't seen you in years, man, look at you. Pulling back, he held his arms and grinned back to him, ready to talk the introduction to death had his team not stepped forward to round in their heirs' excitement. Mr. Uzumaki, are you ready, sir? Yeah, let's get this thing going. His voice died down and he looked to the only woman of the group, gasping as if he recognized her. You must be Miss Sabakuno, right? Yes. She flashed that grin, softer at the edges, more approachable as Naruto came to take her hand, shaking gleefully. I hope you don't mind me sitting in on my partner's presentation. You kidding me? The more the merrier. He leaned in just enough to add more excitement, more pressure to Shikamaru. My uncle Iruka says you're one of the best here, so if you two are partners, this presentation is bound to be news. Kakashi's husband is too kind, Mr. Uzumaki. Temari dropped down to a toothless grin, wary now as the real opponents revealed themselves. Shall we begin? One of the 4 men of the advisory board stepped in and the group settled to begin their battle in the conference room. Her crossed legs bounced ever so slightly, impatience, whether for his slow start or the feeling they had in the room as the 5 men gathered their eyes and set them all to Shikamaru. These people wanted to be wowed and dazzled, so he did as advised and performed. Like that end-of-year dissertation he had back in college, he stood loose and just airing his confidence enough to keep the attention on him. Making his points hit when needed and have the group sit back and nod along to his hidden hands, revealing enough to keep them on edge as Temari did with her confident direct approach. He was more subtle in the ways he persuaded, patiently waiting for cues in his pace, taking them through a story they clung to so that they could find out its mysterious ending. At one point he slowed, letting one of the points sink in and took it to take a calming breath as she had advised, just catching the set-in-stone gaze from his partner, the expectant look for him to keep going, just the slightest nod of her head in approval, and he finally let his daring approach sway their final say. The room silent when he finished. Did he mess up? It's a ludicrous idea, one of the men scoffed, leaning away from the table to sit back with his final judgment. I don't know, it shows promise. Naruto leaned against his arms, looking at his board, considering, thinking long and hard about this view. Thinking how could he become worthy of the title his late parents had left for him to take over someday. It's unreliable, Mr. Uzumaki. We'll lose money on this, another grumble from an old man. Shikamaru's brow just began to crease, searching the outcomes he had predicted before. What would they say when he suggested something so out there as this? Expanding the brand past its desired audience, leading with the idea that they were inclusive and wanted the world to know, everyone include not just the select few they deemed worthy of holding the Uzumaki brand. The crowd was quiet, and not in a good way, like a deafening silence before a brutal battle was about to occur. That tie was beginning to choke him again. And the storm after the calm began. Temari stood from her spot, beginning to speak as she did, flashing that confident grin back to the group as she drew all eyes of the room on herself. As my partner said, Mr. Uzumaki, by following this course of action, your company will benefit from furthering its line towards a more general point of view. She flashed that smile, the one before a deal was made. It's genius, don't you think? Quote, you want us to go urban, one of the elders scoffed distasteful, his $5,000 suit speaking for him. We are a line that goes back to the beginning of fashion in Konoha. We are anything but attainable. Quote, well, urban is cutting it a little short. A bite, a warning, Temari sharpened her glare back at him. The poor wear clothes too. Yeah, Naruto nodded slowly. Mr. Uzumaki, another elder to try his hand at swaying the heir's view. No, it's a good vision. Naruto sat up and looked between the partners, not just for financial gain, but more people could trust our brand as we make it more affordable. They'll believe in us more. Quote, she glanced at Shikamaru, just the subtle squint in her eyes as she gave him back the reins to take over again, the block in the path taken down with her aid. That's right, Shikamaru nodded, following along smoothly. By expanding your general audience, you'll be able to build a wider base, ringing in more people who want your brand but can't afford it. This is the genius I was telling you guys about. Naruto boosted and grinned back at Shikamaru. I'm sold. Sir, you hear that? He's sold. Temari cut through the complaint and flashed her fangs in warning to the men. The ending made with a bow, the companies both prospering from their agreed-upon deal and a rather long conversation about getting old friends together that Naruto suddenly had to entertain at the door of the room. Shikamaru nodded along, inside feeling it all, almost having an emotional crash when the elevator doors finally closed and he let out a breath as he braced himself at the back of the elevator. He had almost failed, almost got Ed down into the water, feeling it rise all the way up his neck, and she had been there to pull him out of the feeling. Thanks for saving me back there. He gave credit where it was due, looking to her. Don't get used to it. She moved from her spot, just a turn to the side to remind him of who she still was. My aid doesn't come cheap, Nara. Quote, you do have a favor to cash in, his casual reminder, curious to know that request, and she let her tone drop, making him look at her closely. All that means is you belong to me until I decide what I want to do with you. She drew out, just tipping on the edge of a sinister reveal, her hand coming up to unbutton the top of her dress shirt, going down a few more buttons before taking a breath as if she could breathe better. He had only watched the first button separate, turning and forcing his eyes on those clear elevator buttons for the rest of her move. As if seeing his evasion to seem more decent, she chuckled in the humming elevator, the sound slowly burning itself into his memories, making him fight a smile at T. He unpredictable move of the day. Didn't need you getting distracted today. And once more her steps led into her domain, leaving behind her partner to walk on her own. Eyes dropped to the end of her blazer, I stand at her side and letting a grin fade into a shake of his head when he realized she still swayed, concluding that she was just as he called it the first day. Troublesome. Like the end of a battle, the day went by in an air of relief. The team seemed more relaxed, their Friday promised with good fortune and a newfound joy in their work. Even Temari left on time that day, finding themselves at each other's sides once more, the buttons still open and revealing, but that hadn't been his focus as they went down. He remembered that her brother was staying back at college that weekend. That look she had, that slip of doting excitement in talking to him, a fond little glint in her eyes during the phone call that Shikamaru had seen before he had entered the room was one of those rare out-of-character moments. Like a whole other woman stood there, only returning when she noticed him. He hoped he could be one step closer in getting to know his partner better with the ask. Plans for the weekend. She looked at him when he spoke into the causal air, once, then looking back to the doors to offer a small shrug of her shoulder, agreeing to indulge him in small talk. If you were my friend, she began, his eyes shut and he sighed, still stuck at the starting line with her, but her next admission made him quickly catch each word. I'd tell you that I have plans with another friend of mine later. Quote. He waited a floor before asking. Do I know this friend? Curious in his tone, he caught her glance over with his own look meeting hers. Why so curious to know? Just a subtle narrow, focused on his response, ready to judge it, the corner of her lip fighting between a smirk or neutral pout. Can't help it. He wondered when his nerves stopped, focused and holding her gaze, admitting his honest reason. You make me curious. The lip settled on a smirk, only there long enough to be noticed before she looked to the elevator doors, his eyes still on her. The air around them changed like a switch. Cold. I wonder if your girlfriend makes you curious too, Shikamaru. They said she was a mistress before she was cruel. Question was it true? Don't be late on Monday. Her final words, a professional warning. He followed her as he watched her walk away, his steps frozen in place, but remembering each step she took away from him. The click of those damn heels echoing in the back of his mind as he sighed and went home. Friday, 8:32 p.m. Shikamaru would have preferred an easy one-on-one celebration, but he had stupidly made a promise a couple weeks ago to his, not blood-related, sister. Knowing Ino, if he didn't follow through she'd definitely pull her famous actress card and cast her sorrows on the audience. That was their family. This was saved him a lot of grief, and in return Ino picked a club he enjoyed. Not loud and not crazy, an elegant aura around the room, music at times questionable for its rushed beats, but overall a great place to have a drink and zone out while the others enjoyed each other's companies. Tonight he didn't want solitude, he wanted to just let life go where it wanted to, unpredictable or not. Like the clouds above, they went along with the breeze and flew through the blue shades of sky, and just like them he would too. That's if his girlfriend's nerves could be settled by his carefree attitude tonight. How did you get us roped into this? Shiho huffed under her breath as she fought the strap to her shoulder, her blush rose dress a size too big and her nerves heightened at the look of the private club around them. It won't be so bad, Ino promised us a quiet evening, and I actually believe her this time. He nodded confidently, pausing his final step to release his hand from her back, eyes already set on the familiar life of the party. Blonde, beautiful, and cheerfully sharing it all with the world. She had said quiet, but it was hard not to recognize Konoha's precious new gem of the season, a diamond used to being on display, admired and loved by all. The fiancé she tugged around barely noticed when the blue eyes met his and he forced a tight smile when Ino squealed their names. I can only talk about modeling for so long, Shikamaru. Shiho muttered, and just as he did stepped closer to the table. It's her paon, he shrugged, adding in a subtle grin and wink to ease her, just zone out like I do. Drink in hand, the exciting introduction made and Shikamaru stood back, letting Shiho do her nodding and socially interacting with Ino for them. Ready to be tagged in once Ino got her energy high enough for Shiho to handle. Just waiting on one more, Ino kept her eyes shifting around, like a meerkat looking for danger, but instead offered what she was looking for as she gasped then pouted, thinking she saw this one more, but getting now. As she sat back down and sipped her drink, careful of her glossed lips taking the straw. Great. More of Ino's friends. He huffed under his breath and hid his irritation behind the drink, looking around the space. Quiet was promised, but being interrupted the first few minutes put a dent in the mood. Apparently she was more popular this visit than the last. His quiet observation swayed one way then the other, right hand on his GL of aged scotch, lazily taking in the room and just pinged the forbidden shade. He blinked. A second look wasn't just needed, but required to keep himself from that fine line between composed and maddened. To keep from making that stupid face Temari called him out for. Climbing down the steps and towards the table, his eyes played their tricks and his breath caught some anywhere between his parched swallow and his jaw threatening to drop when he recognized who it was. The shade of red on her lips, darker now, matching the color of her velvet dress, shoulders bare and a softly tied knot twisting in the front of her chest, revealing a generous amount of naturally tan. Ned's skin pushed together, hair loose and waved at her tips, bangs tucked to the side and drawn on so lightly he couldn't tell if she was wearing makeup or not. The only sign of it seen around her eyes, the black framing that forbidden shade his logic still couldn't comprehend. Following the lines of the rich berry color of her dress, the cloth clung to her body like a mold, tight, perfectly filling out her hourgirl form and snuggly ending just at her knees, the click of strapped black heels non-existent as they hit the floor below. But her presence was loud enough to him. He saw her before anyone else, finding her in a room of blurred faces and dulled music, standing out in a crowd of elites and making them nobodies to him. She promised torture, but he wasn't ready for this kind of pain, making his mind go blank and feelin'. His gut twist when she found him, drawn in as he was. As if feeling his gaze on hers, their eyes connected, and neither could pull away for whatever unscheduled moment this was. Curse his memories, for he would remember this moment for the rest of his life. To make matters worse, a man came to her side and he couldn't for the life of him figure out why he was suddenly angered by his presence, especially when he put a hand to her bare shoulder and spoke close and low to her. Almost as if he was envious that her attention wasn't on him anymore. Taking each of those seconds he kept his eyes on her to heart before releasing a breath and returning to reality. The grip on his GL had tightened, but his girlfriend was still forcefully engrossed in one of Ino's many tales of her life traveling. What was Temari doing here of all places? His answer, a blonde in a designer lavender and blue dress screaming at the top of her lungs. Temari, Ino called out, already abandoning the group around her to rush over to the two new arrivals, making the table look back to see why. They leaned into one another, pressing cheeks in kisses without letting their lips leave a mark on the other, saying some foreign greeting after. The smile this time was softer, genuine, sharing Ino's excitement with little effort. You came, I'm so glad you accepted my invitation for tonight. Had a change in my schedule, so I was free to come. Temari glanced down admiring the shade of the dress as she returned to Ino. It's not often you're in town this long and once again wearing ASCII designs. Quote, just taking a break between gigs right now, Ino twirled, showing off with a wink, a little side promoting for the little guy while I'm at it. They shared a laugh with one another, before the dark-haired man that had waited to the side was grabbed by his sleeve and brought closer to her. This is that friend of mine I was telling you about on Wednesday. With a firm push she made her date step forward with a shy hand extended to shake Ino's, her smile falling into a wondrous drop in her jaw. Eyes locked in the exchange blurring on its edges to seem like a romantic love at first sight scene. Sigh. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Yamanaka. As he introduced himself, his nerves evened out and his short smile grew when hers did, as if she calmed him enough to enjoy the moment. You can call me Ino. Both stuck in the first exchange, smiles growing, almost there. Then it fell and Ino gasped, looking at Temari with a bright smile. Oh, where are my manners? This is my fiancé. Said fiancé came around Ino to shake hands, only getting Sai to accept. Temari tightened her grin, suddenly stiff. You got engaged. Yeah, last week, she nodded excitedly, slowly dimming down as she casted a glance back to her brother in confusion. I'm surprised Shikamaru didn't tell you. It's the first I'm hearing about it. Said through her teeth, bared and with a dangerous gleam in her eyes, as if he'd made a mistake. Strike one. Shiho. As if remembering the other occupants of the group, Ino turned to the table and presented the new arrival. This is Temari Sabakuno. Remember I told you guys all about her at the lake house. Shiho Yamaharu. Shiho raised a hand to shake. One look down and that tight smile shot back to her. An. Dangerous stiffness already set on Temari's bare shoulders. Yamaharu. She drew out and flashed a wider grin now, looking at her hand and then back to Shiho's gaze. Your father is a lawyer for the Sharingan firm's legal team. She hummed, flashing her gaze at Shikamaru, speaking through her teeth. How curious. Strike 2. In trouble again. You know him? Shiho asked, her hand falling unshaken and tensing when Temari returned to her, the smile yet to fall. You could say that. Well, come on, enough introductions. I've got the entire night planned out. Ino interrupted, leaving behind her fiancé to grab Temari's arm. Please tell me you're up for dancing. No one here dances anymore and I've been dying for a partner who doesn't have 2 left feet. I'm not nearly drunk enough for that, Ino, Temari scoffed, putting a hand to the man's shoulder, sly grin in place, but Sai here has a talent like no other. Quote, really? She glanced at Sai, a new quieter excitement unlocked, her love of dance, music, and the arts. What's your favorite style? With it Sai smiled a little softer, admitting, I'm particularly a fan of the clickles, but I do enjoy the quicker pace of the tango as well. Sai nodded to her. His thin line drawn out as Ino grinned back at him. Really? Me too. He just noticed it, the little narrow in her smoky teal eyes, watching the two's interaction carefully, almost as if she was searching for any mistakes or getting ready to step in when needed. Whatever she was doing with her move to push the new guy towards Ino, Shikamaru barely noticed, stuck between trying not to stare and staring, as if he was caught on only her and no one else. Shikamaru almost had to shake himself to remember where he was and who he was with. His girlfriend still tense at his side, feeling her discomfort as much as his own, both for 2 different reasons. Then that engagement story made its way. He internally groaned as Ino went on, having literally been there for the whole thing and now there a second time for it all, and at Temari sighed loudly. I'm very disappointed in you. Temari set her GL down, the gin tasted and approved, but her sights set to Ino, marriage. You're a little young, don't you think? 24 is not that young. Ino pulled away from her fiancé to lean against the table, closer to he. You told me your parents were younger than that when they got married. Yes, but it's different in Suna culture. Women marry young there. Temari huffed, leaning against her hand to glare just a bit harder back to her. The only reason they got married was the fact that they couldn't wait for their wedding night. You're a love baby. Ino cooed and nudged her shoulder. More like drunken accident. Temari scoffed, glancing away. You are a cynic. Sai added with a sigh. So are you two dating? Ino asked as both Sai and Temari glanced at her then each other and laughed, matching the other in trying to hide their amusement towards the question. I wouldn't date Sai if he was the last man on earth. Temari made her mocking remark and glanced at him. I see Temari as more of a sister. He smirked back to her. I'm practically one of her brothers. An unfortunate series of events in how we got here, Temari taunted back, raising a finger to stop Sai from talking. Ones we will not be sharing in company, a warning, and his eyes narrowed back. She punched me, Sai blurted out. It was an accident, you came out of nowhere. Slapping his arm, he leaned against her shoulder for a breath of a second, almost calming her in a way, and they turned back to Ino. Now that I believe, she shared in their amusement, even more when the second drink took its warming hold on Temari. So you're still single. I told you before, Ino, men are only good for 2 things. She raised 2 fingers one at a time, and mockery. Quote, and knocking out, Ino added as if they've had this discussion a million times before. And knocking out, Temari agreed, the conversation shifting over to Shiho as she broke from her mold to speak. Unlike the 2 women ahead of her, she was mostly soft-spoken. That's a pretty harsh take on relationships, kinda cruel to think of it that way, Shiho muttered, obvious discomfort with the casual back and forth the others were having. Not used to blunt and CR ads, taught to be elegant and speak eloquently always. Temari, however, lost her filter the moment the drinks made her warm, her fire sparked. I don't like to waste my time on people who aren't worth the effort. She shrugged, and most men can't keep up with me anyways. Quote, maybe not those from this part of town, she scoffed at Sai's addition. Is that why they call you the cruel mistress? Shiho asked, a little too forceful, her once straightened posture shrinking back when Temari looked her way, cold. No, Temari bared her grin a little harder, crushing in one slow step, but rumors do hold some truth to them, don't you think? Shiho tensed slightly, pressing a little closer to Shikamaru, but the teals took their pity on the weak and looked to Ino when she scoffed out her remark. That entire building is nothing more than a center for gossip, I swear, Ino huffed, putting a comforting hand to Temari's shoulder, but she chuckled it off as if it didn't bother her. You never settle for the opinions of sheep Ino, they flock together even if it's off a cliff. Quote, he almost didn't hear his name called after, distracted in his thoughts and keeping tabs on every point in the conversation, absently doing his job of comforting Shiho by making sure their arms touched, a regular evening with elites. So how was the presentation today, Shikamaru? He looked back to Ino, just catching the last of the question, having been staring at the GL before him deep in his thoughts. Shiho said it was your first. Quote, right. Suddenly unable to figure out what to do with hands, more nervous now than he had been before the presentation today, he fidgeted with his jacket as he straightened. 5 pairs of eyes set on him, and just as he made his plan, Temari stepped in, turning the attention on her. Strike 3 and he was out. He did well for his first time. Temari nodded her approval, ending in a taunt directed at him. Entitlement helped him. Look at Temari, playing well with other. Sai chuckled, since when did you start betting on the new hires? Quote, I like to gamble, what can I say? She shrugged, focus set on Shikamaru, locked in an almost unapologetic manner. Who knows, I might even let him stay if he can keep up with my high standards. The damn imprint on the GL after she drank from it, stained and taunting, a longer look than necessary. Playing off the look with a sigh and new focus set on Ino. I'm sure my dad appreciates you helping out so much. I'm all for charitable work, Ino. Another insult to throw his way, and he fought it, turning his grin into a sip of his drink and harder glare back at her, warning her back. She almost seemed to relish in it, his fight to keep quiet and not engage, or was she doing it on purpose like her walk? Enough fun, and she turned her eyes back to Ino, ignoring the way Shiho watched them. You never did say how your trip to Kumo was, and I want every detail about that cliff shoot you did by the sea. She slowly glanced at her fiancé, fighting a sneer, aside from the obvious surprise engagement. Quote, where do I start? Ino put her drink down and began her tale. She watched Ino intently, hanging on every word of the repeated story of her times modeling abroad, showing further interest as she returned in a calmer smile and asking questions. Engaging, friendlier if you tilted your head, Ino looking back excitedly as she asked about a previous project of hers that made its way to the billboards a few months back. Spilling the story of how she promoted a product worth her time, crushing everything in her way to see herself on top. Her cruelty applauded once more. His eyes dropped back to the nearly empty GL and took in Shiho's furrowed brows as she tried to keep up between the talking blondes. Whatever the topic, she nodded along, trying to fit in as most elites inspired to be a part of the group. The night, a thread being slowly cut on his end every time he'd fight and lose that look over at her, unable to comprehend the rising insanity of the whole evening. As unpredictable as it got, and he stupidly had wished to have just that, a night he'd just breezed through turned into treading through deep waters once again. This time she wouldn't help him through it. No, she was purposefully pushing him below the water level, seeing if he'd sink or swim. He was on the verge of drowning. Up until her date put a hand to her arm and muttered something to her, rising as she did, agreeing to leave the group for new drinks. Temari had known him since they were teens, hustling for any work they could find to make ends meet. Bounced from one foster home to another before making it out on his own. Sai didn't necessarily call himself a member of her family, but he did crash a few times the Sabakuno's couch when times were tough. Unbothered by the cruel approaches she had towards life and even amused when he got to witness it in person, he was a friend she could trust. He was a friend she owed a favor to. Here we go, Temari mumbled under her breath, catching eyes with the man as he finally stopped that slow step to address her. Thought you said she was single, Temari. Sai muttered and leaned against the counter to wave the bartender over. She was, Temari huffed under her breath, shaking her head as she slid into the velvet red barstool. I can fix this. Our deal was you introduce us so I can finally ask her out. Sai huffed, fixing the growing creases on his face and slowly dragging a hand across it, defeated. Who am I kidding? This was a ridiculous idea. Relax, Sai. Don't get worked up just yet, she scolded calmly and glanced back at the group, catching the cheerful way Ino charmed the others with a smile and another enchanting tale of some kind, but her gaze wandered past her priority. To him, jaw tight and brows furrowed deeply, glaring at his GL Scotch in focus, no doubt caught in some deep train of thought. That woman at his side, stiff, uncomfortable to be in such a place as this private club, no doubt a good girl and perfect marriage material for the entitled rich boy. The perfect girl. And a Ing Yamaharu at that. Her father a pesky roadblock in letting her deal with the direct management team of Sharingan's firm, having to work now with a stoic Sasuke to get things going instead. Used to crushing others' dreams, she almost found it pathetic of herself that the man who had worked wonders in the past couple of days settled on such a meager mention. Did he really think himself that low? That unwilling to give it his all? Especially with a commitment such as marriage and even more so with a girl as plain as a blank sheet of paper. Temari had almost begun to like him. What was wrong with her? As heartless as she could be, it would truly be like taking candy from a baby. Then again, she really couldn't help the irritating curiosity she had towards him. As stupid as his surprised face was, it made her want to find new ways to throw him off, in whatever way she could do it. Everything else just seemed to spark some kind of forbidden fire from hell when he had to make her pause and consider, as if her fast pace was halted just for him. Almost as if he only shared those intimate thoughts of his mind with her. He was clearly more complex than she had first thought, entitled still, but showing his humble nature at times that caught her off guard. That day she had worked with him, willingly helping him see his plan through, standing back and letting him lead, stepping in to save his, it all came tumbling back into her the moment her sights caught his in that stupid look when she first got here. Temari had considered leaving right then and there had Sai not reminded her of their deal, her end of the favor to be seen through. She still wanted to slap him, if anything, for obviously sneaking glances at her all throughout the night. She could even say most of the looks weren't at her chest, instead focused solely on every word she said. Like the first time he had watched her perform on the stage, focus set on her and hanging to every word, same as Kisame had. He was odd as the rest, but there was something else, something beyond that indifference, beyond that lewd look, beyond it all. And she needed to know. Like the end of a chapter, stuck on a stupid cliffhanger to keep the readers coming back for more. She didn't know he'd be here tonight. She hadn't planned to entertain two favors in one room, but if anything, Temari was known for multitasking. I told you I'd handle it, she said firmly, glaring back at Sai as he scoffed. It doesn't look like you're putting much effort in. As if to emphasize his point, she fixed the front of her dress, lifting the falling front to cover her s more. So mopey today, she mocked a pout at him, slapping his arm lightly when he rolled his eyes, falling into a sigh of longing. It's like you don't even come from Southside sometimes, Sai. Living in downtown has changed me, for the better. Sai chuckled and sipped his drink quietly as he hid a softer grin at the way Ino threw that wondrous smile around the others. It brought so much joy that he basked in its glow even with his distance from her. Her silent admirer since that day of the company event a few months back, where he had accidentally spilled a red GL of wine on her dress and before they could exchange apologies, she had kept running and ended up having the time of her night with another blonde from their table. Love has made you weak. Temari scoffed, sipping her drink, stilling and furrowing her brows as he sighed. She almost gagged when he spoke and she drank until he emptied the cup. I want to marry that woman. Very weak, Temari emphasized, setting her empty GL down. You're lucky you're a good guy, Sai, or else I'd make sure you never had this chance. I like Ino, she's a good friend, she sighed, but she can get too caught up in shiny things, such as that temporary fiancé of hers. I guess I can thank you for the favor of meeting her at least. Such doubt in my abilities, a harder glare, serious and promising with each word, teaching herself to read people well throughout the years. She is in love with the idea of that man, nothing more, trust me. Adding more for herself, taking her new GL in hand, a simple gin on ice, second of the night after nursing the first during conversation, making her feel warm, but still cold on the outside. Love is a stupid notion for girls, she's a woman, give her time. I don't doubt you, Temari, but I'm not the only one here chasing forbidden fruit. She inhaled sharply as he slid a sly glance to her. His nephew, Temari, really? He sighed, shaking his head in disapproval. She rolled her eyes. You know the rules, no internal fraternization. Funny you mention that, because that fruit seems to like me, if anything for my. Well, you are rather. He began looking down the back of the dress and got cut off by her slap again, chuckling as he watched her go back to the drink in hand and took an eager sip to cool herself down with. Looking back at him, back at the group, then back again, she let out a sigh and trusted her friend of nearly a decade. I don't know, it's like I can't help myself. He's stupidly interesting to me and I'm bored enough to entertain it. Admitting though her teeth and huffing at the end. The best kind of bored, he hummed, makes one do stupid things. His chuckle grew into a sinister drawl, a little south side coming into his focused stare at the table, alert caution she seemed to miss. That girlfriend of his doesn't stand a chance. With a resounding sigh she made her final decision. She picked her career over a fleeting fling she was attracted to. Maybe she could entertain a weekend away from this with her brother as her wingman. I'm not going to pursue anything, I'll just ignore him. I've got too much to do anyways with the Southside project and this alliance, and I can't be distracted right now, especially when Inochi is accepting us to perform for that CEO title. She added her own prideful mention, between the heads of our departments, I'm still the top runner as Tsunade's replacement. He hadn't looked back to her as he hummed his conclusion of their talk, focus elsewhere, simply taking his drink and leaving her alone. Maybe you just need to get it out of your system, you seem a little stressed lately. His casual departure leaving her to overthink the comment to death, wondering what he was going on about, downing the GL in one go and slamming the bottom to the counter a little rougher than she wanted to. Then she realized why he had left. That whole, did your date piss you off? Sai is not my date, she nearly growled it, shooting Shikamaru a look as he leaned against the counter, focus set ahead to wait for the bartender. I'm just doing him a favor. I'm sure if I asked, you wouldn't tell me. Not a chance, Nara, she smirked, taking his further silence as a win, but he was already ahead of her. What are you drinking? Quote, you want to buy me a drink for saving your today? Quick to catch up, he grinned down to the counter and spoke. It only seems appropriate. He finally looked at her, smirking, only making it halfway before adding his shot, that's if you don't spill it on me. Quote, no tie this time, nothing to scold him for. Maybe the hair, she hadn't expected it to be that long, half tied up, the rest caressing his shoulders, the tense in his jaw when she agreed without much thought about it. We'll see, she hummed, letting her eyes do their shameless drop over all of him, cursing liquor for loosening her restraints and straightening her posture with his mention. Both taking a breath away from the other. So when were you going to tell me you were friends with Ino? Now he looked at her, leaning on his left arm to the counter, with that harder glare, focused on her gaze and nothing else. She might have been tipsy, but her tongue was still as sharp as ever. The same time you were going to tell me your girlfriend's father was Hanji Yamaharu. Raising her brows at him, emphasizing her point. Why does that matter? He raised a brow, waiting for her explanation, waiting to figure out why she seemed so on edge around Shiho, and she didn't hold back. You. P dating her current struggles to her partner. He's the prick holding back a few of my advances in the Sharingan deal, it's making things harder to work around, legally speaking. She sighed heavily with her admission, that's why I'm working with Sasuke to get things going, to make this alliance worth the effort, but I'm not getting much ground with him either. She huffed, venting her frustrations a little easier with the help of her drinks, showing her frustrations openly and glaring at the back of the bar. It's like being stuck between two hard places and having nowhere to go. He's not any friendlier in person, Shikamaru made his muttered remark about his girlfriend's stoic father, blowing out his own sigh at the thought of Hanji. Strict and at times making remarks that made the hairs at the end of his neck prickle. His approval hard to sway and unimpressed with anything that wasn't perfect, giving his only daughter anxiety to perform well for him every time they interacted with the elites. No wonder Temari disliked the name, glaring at her new drink and muttered foreign words made in a bitter growl. You know, you either have to teach me Sunian or tell me what you said. She rolled her eyes at him, already set to a glare. It's hard to translate since we have 4 different ways of calling someone a piece of shit, blunt and made with a tight smile at the end, he scoffed. No wonder you get along with Ino, you're both mean, he shook his head, cradling that new drink in one hand and the other to hold the lighter eye. In his pocket, itching for a cigarette at that moment, a little less when she sighed and spoke a little calmer, not quiet, but more focused. I actually met Ino by accident, Temari admitted, leaning against her hand and looking back to the table, right at the woman she was talking about. I mean, I knew about her, obviously, but I actually met her when she was trying to get away from Inochi's little entourage of kissers last year. She smirked, looking back to him with a prideful grin, so I helped her escape. Quote, I heard all about that. He lifted his GL to his lips and paused when she smirked his way. Heard you knocked a guy out too. He was trying to make unwanted advances and ruin our girl's night, she shrugged, he deserved it. He hummed his own judgment to the statement and took a sip, glancing back at the table, at the fiancé she openly sneered. Not the first guy I've laid flat on his. Remind me never to piss you off. She threw him a smile this time, a little lighter in its intent. You'd be stupid if you did. Ignore him, she told herself, instead taking his quiet observation of her and seeing it leave to look around the club, with that slow down to consider her own options and trust a little more as Inic. I had said, to let the warm feeling of the alcohol spread over her body and make the decision for her. Maybe just this once. That fiancé that Ino so adores is going to cheat on her soon, quickly bringing his eyes back to her, that thoughtful look hardened and he hung to every word she said. I give them less than a month before she catches him in the act. How do you know that? She couldn't help herself. Because just like you, he hasn't stopped staring at my ass all night. As if proving her point, he focused on those glinting teals as they met his gaze and he hid the guilt behind his own GL, refusing to lose the connection to her when she slid off her seat and just leaned in enough for him to feel her words breeze against his skin, hooked. Your girlfriend is right there, Shikamaru, you should be ashamed of yourself for even thinking about me like that. Not meaning a word she said, and he didn't deny it, she followed her scold with a sly grin and brushed past him, just tapping his shoulder with hers for a moment and holding back the tipsy laugh in her chest with her throwback. Besides, I'm too troublesome for you anyways, you wouldn't last a night with me. A warning and puzzle like no other. He blinked and his trace broke, just feeling the weight of those words, ashamed as she had said even when he still turned to drop his eyes at her departure. That sway. The breath that escaped, barely making it past his lips, wondering why he was itching to take on this challenge, as if it was the only thing he could focus on. He was not a superficial guy, not entirely, he didn't fall so low as to act like a hormonal teenager either, but this woman. This woman, sparked urges down generational lines. It's as if he couldn't help himself but be told what to do by her, to find any ways to seek that approval those around her sought, to dare he say, please her any way she wanted. Her whole being screamed paean through every fiber, offering many to try and many more to fail that bar she set. And he wanted to be worthy of her mention. When did that fear turn into admiration, and when did that bleed into desire so heavy it made his very breath catch every time those forbid shades turned his way? He was ensnared by her lips, the way they parted to speak, to yell, to press themselves to glees and cigarettes and leave those marks just for him. Controlled in her reality of temptation and daring bravado. Taunting a sway and hooking primal urges to make the decision for him, caught in whatever story she told. Simple curiosity towards the challenge she proposed, and he couldn't wait to find out what her favor would be. He would do anything for her in this moment. Anything. Are you ready to leave? Broken out of his thoughts, he forced a blink to look down at Shiho as she came to his side, looking exhausted and peeking around the bar before turning her gaze up at him, soft, but with immense discomfort. Something wrong. It's getting late and you know we have to drive up to my parents tomorrow. Not this again, he almost groaned out loud when she reminded him of his dreadful Saturday ahead, more dancing around to please the greedy wealthy of the city. If his mother was here and she heard that, he'd have a red mark on the back of his head already. I told you before, I don't want to talk to your dad about that again, Shiho. He sipped his drink, turning away from her to the counter. It's just a prenup, Shikamaru. And I told you I won't sign one. Firm in his response, she huffed and leaned beside him, he wasn't budging in his own beliefs, ones his father taught him from a young age, ones that made him humble in understanding the value of a dollar. Marriage is not about money. To him it is. She sighed. He fought arguing more, knowing it would only lead to more trouble and he could do with less of that right now. Can we at least discuss this when we get home? She glanced back at the table, said on Temari as she flashed that toothless smile back to Ino. I don't feel like being here anymore. Yeah, alright. His drink downed. Rather quickly, he put a hand to her back, taking the lead and guiding them back to the table, already drawn to the woman who showed her hand, and he folded to her as he looked away. The guilt slowly coming back. Temari looked back to Ino, glinting that useless diamond ring around as she spoke, and as soon as the moment presented itself she went in for the attack. You want my honest opinion, you can do much better than him, Ino. Temari made her blunt remark and brought her GL to her lips, tilted her gifted drink and savored the bitter taste for only a moment, but not the one it caused Ino. Like a double-edged sword it cut her to know Inochi's daughter would get hurt, and she couldn't help her. If anything, you're honest. She muttered, a little thrown off by such force. I don't lie to my friends. Temari leaned in closer, putting a hand to her arm. I want you to call me when you need me, alright? Quote. Leaving so soon? Ino looked confused as Temari stood and walked around to her other side to lean down and press another lipless kiss to her cheek, leaving no marks on her flawless features. I'm done with my night, dear, but Sai should tell you all about the production he's making for the Ooze Umaki brand next week. Temari let a softer smile turn down to her, the warmth aiding the delicate curve on her lips. They'll be needing models and you'll be my first recommendation, Ino. Really? Her mouth dropped in wonder, the brand not only exclusive, but a model's dream gig. Tell her all about it, Sai. She threw a wink at her friend and gave him his opening to make his mark. Pulling away from the group, her smile fell and her thoughts returned at full force, focused and ready to take out all in her way. Cold. Temari took her leave, ignoring the dark eyes she knew would follow her out, and climbed down the steps to the outside of the prestigious nightclub. So much to process, her drinks only aiding in slowing down the world a fraction of a second for her before she remembered why she did this. Grabbing the phone from her purse she made quick work of calling the one person she knew could help her. A man answered. Hey, you still awake? I was just headed to bed. She blew out a sigh of relief and asked. Think you can spare some of that sleep for me? She smirked. I know your wife won't mind. My door will be open, Temari. See you soon.